Don't worry, you have your whole life ahead of you. It's a common phrase that a lot of young people hear. Young people like Anna, a 14-year-old schoolgirl living in Ireland in 2018. No one could have predicted the horrifying events that would take place on an ordinary day after school in May. This is the story of Anastasia Creel. She was a very special little girl. Anastasia, who ended up going by the nickname Anna, was born just a few days after Valentine's Day, on February 18, 2004, all the way in Novokuznetsk, Russia. It is located in Siberia. After her birth, her biological mother actually surrendered her to a Russian orphanage, where she stayed for the first 2.5 years of her life. Now, many of us have heard the word orphanage, and maybe, if you're my age, you think back to A Little Orphan Annie, the movie Annie, and what the conditions were like as depicted by Hollywood. But if you thought that those children were living the hard-knock life, Russian orphanages have an even worse reputation. During my research, I read numerous stories about children who lived in Russian orphanages around the same time that Anna did. One story I read was about a little boy who was only 11 years old. His name was Zenya, and he went through what I could only describe as absolutely horrifying. After being adopted, he was raised in Buffalo, New York. And this is what he said when he was interviewed about his experience as a child. He said he had experienced and seen things that no child should ever be exposed to. Being emotionally scarred, it was difficult for him to discuss the early events of his childhood without getting upset. The fact that he couldn't even discuss some of the things he went through should tell you how bad they really were. These children, they feel isolated, abandoned. They go through fear and confusion. And that's at the least. It can be much worse than that. Many Russian orphanages are underfunded. They don't have enough staff members and they're severely overpopulated, with too many children for the staff to adequately care for, and the conditions are terrible. There's inadequate nutrition, insufficient emotional care, and many of these children are underdeveloped mentally and physically. The longer they stay there, the worse off they are. Children are typically bathed together in ice-cold water, by the way, because not a lot of places have available hot water in these facilities. And it's true that they actually do eat porridge, hardly ever getting meat or protein unless it's tiny scraps of chicken. The children share beds, usually with old mattresses that are worn out and have been donated. The mental stimulation is lacking because there are no extra funds for toys or other activities to develop their minds. I read all about this, and I also found an organization called Human Rights Watch. They continue to fight for the rights of individuals worldwide, and they're still reporting high numbers of neglect and physical trauma in Russian orphanages. Many times children will try to escape, as they have a better chance of surviving on the streets. This is just a snapshot of what life was like for little Anna. We don't know everything she went through, but it's been said that she was left alone a lot, while the staff tried to manage more unruly children. Because she was little, she was a baby. In their minds, she was probably easier to take care of. But this resulted in Anna having a lack of social and emotional developmental skills at first. Now, looking through a different lens for a moment, life for a married couple, Geraldine and Patrick Creel, about 4,000 miles away in Ireland, was quite different. By 2006, they had been married for 20 years. They were soulmates, best friends, and a little older in age than the typical first-time parents. But that's what was missing: a family. They wanted a child so badly. The adoption process was very long. It can take years, and the criteria are high. Parents must meet specific standards before they're allowed to adopt, especially outside of their country. And the adoption laws in Russia are very strict. They actually discourage foreign adoption, and they prefer children to be adopted domestically. For example, foreign adoption agencies must go through an accreditation process, and they have to be certified by Russia, or they can't do business there. Once a child does become available, it takes months before they can even be considered to be ready for adoption. And then there's a waiting period of between 5 months and a year, not to mention the fees. There are many fees included, and generally speaking, I've seen adoption fees, not including travel, upward of $25,000 to $35,000. The Creels lived in a safe home in a quiet country village, a leafy suburb called Leixlip, in the northeast of County Kildare, Ireland. They had the resources, the means, and the flexibility to care for a child. Patrick was originally from Paris, France. He taught commercial and business French language skills to students at the Dublin Institute of Technology, while Geraldine worked as a senior manager in the legal department of the state public transportation company. They both had successful careers. After years of waiting for a child to call their own, they were informed that little Anna, only 2.5 years old, was available, and they could not wait to meet her. It was love at first sight. They flew all the way over to Ireland for their very first meetup, and the Crucials couldn't wait to shower Anna with love. This was their dream, but they didn't want to get their hopes up, so they kept the adoption quiet until they were 100% certain it was going forward. Once everything was set up and they got Anna back to Ireland, they could not wait to tell their friends and family that they finally had a daughter. It was August 10, 2006, the official adoption day. A week later, Anna came home with them. To announce the good news, the excited parents gathered all of their family and friends together, and they gave them a little Russian nesting doll to open. These are traditional Russian toys and collectibles. If you've never seen them before, each wooden nesting doll opens up to reveal an even smaller one. Well, Patrick and Geraldine had a special surprise in their nesting dolls. The smallest of them revealed a picture of Anna inside. As a matter of fact, Anna's new parents wanted her to appreciate her native culture. They believed Anna should know her entire story, and that's why they decided to keep her name, Anastasia. Anna's nationality played a significant role in the entire family's lives. Anna even found and maintained contact with her younger birth siblings as she got older. Not only did Geraldine and Patrick celebrate Anna's birthday February 18th, but they continued to celebrate every year on August 10th, the day they finalized her adoption. It was a big deal. Anna also had a younger brother, Aaron. I'm sorry to say, there wasn't a lot of information for me to ascertain whether he had also been adopted, but I assume that, since Patrick and Geraldine were a little older in age at the time, they probably did end up getting Aaron from possibly even the same orphanage, although I don't know how old he was or how much later they adopted him or if he was born. Nevertheless, family was the most important thing to the Crucials, and their once quiet life as a couple turned into quite an adventure once Anna and Aaron came along. Anna was Daddy's little girl and Mommy's little princess. Here are some adorable pictures that I found of her and Patrick together, and of course of Anna and Geraldine. They wanted Anna to have everything they could provide, and I can tell from these photos of her childhood that her family spent time loving on her. Ice skating, skiing, eating at restaurants, painting, just spending quality time together. And Anna was just precious. Those big blue eyes, she had such innocence and wonder. But with all the positives in Anna's life, there were a lot of struggles that wouldn't be apparent from the outside looking in. While Anna was growing up, she faced several difficulties. Initially, it was the language barrier. Since she was only exposed to Russian for the first 2.5 years of her life, Anna struggled to learn English, and that's to be expected. It's typically easier for young children to learn a second language, but Anna faced obstacles due to her experience in the orphanage. Children's brains develop at a fast pace in those first 2 years of life, but nevertheless, the Crucials did everything they could to help their daughter, and soon she was assimilating just fine into her new home. But next, there were the attachment issues, and again, due to the neglect in the orphanage, most of Anna's time there was spent in a crib. She wasn't cuddled, she wasn't shown love like a parent usually does with their children. Some children just lay in the crib all day long. Those nurturing relationships and positive learning experiences, coupled with proper nutrition and health, are what give babies a solid foundation for life, and Anna lacked these vital aspects. She missed out on that love and affection. But Geraldine and Patrick made up for that loss once she was in their care. They supported their daughter with whatever she needed. One of the first significant struggles that Anna faced was medical in nature. She was in elementary school, and a doctor found a tumor in her right ear during a routine medical exam. Although the doctor said this could be removed, The 5.5-hour surgery left Anna almost deaf in her right ear, and she was partially blind in that right eye. But that didn't stop her. She even had, supposedly, a noticeable scar left behind, but her mother described her as wild, wonderful, electric, and full of fun, madness, and laughter. I couldn't find any pictures that showed it. I did see a small one right by her eye, but I wasn't able to pinpoint where any of the others were. To my eyes, she was just as flawless as can be. The scar was apparently on the back of her head, and she had another one under her chin due to a bad fall. But aside from the scars being cosmetic in nature, her hearing and vision problems did cause her to fall behind academically. Unfortunately, she also had short-term memory issues related to some of her ailments, which made it very difficult for her to remember terms that she had to learn in school. So, it was hard for her to get ahead during primary school, which in Ireland goes all the way up through middle school until 8th grade. Her parents often met with her guidance counselor, and she was put into special classes so that she could try to get on par with other students. The counselor did have some concerns about Anna, considering she was getting a little later start academically, but she was doing really well, considering everything that she had gone through. She was happy. The concerns were more about the future, when she had to transition into high school. This is a time in these children's lives when everything's changing. Hormones are changing, they're in an awkward stage, and the counselor was giving a warning that she thought Anna might have some trouble adjusting, primarily because of how sensitive her nature was. But there were other things as well. Anna had a very colorful personality. She could be a little loud, obnoxious, overly excited, and that's normal for many kids her age. However, she had a tendency to gravitate toward younger children. She was still interested in cartoons, for example, when a lot of other children were moving more towards sports. The Crucials were determined to make life as comfortable and happy as possible for Anna, so they decided to put her in swimming. She was very good at it. She was very athletic and growing at a much faster rate than most of the other kids her age, which made her inclined towards this more athletic side by nature. She also loved to dance and sing, and she decided to start dancing with a local dance troupe in the area, where she met some of her closest friends. Anna would spend hours practicing her dancing in front of the mirror. She would watch YouTube videos to learn the dance moves, and her mom loved to watch her. It was one of her fondest memories of Anna growing up. As her guidance counselor predicted, though, things weren't smooth sailing for Anna in secondary school. Before even getting there, when she was about to make the transition, she confided in one of her teachers that she didn't know if she wanted to live anymore. That's really sad. She just kept saying she was excited because she imagined that maybe she was finally going to make some nice friends her own age. She craved friendship. She just wanted friends so badly. She wanted to belong. But once in secondary school, which goes from 9th grade until 12th, or from about the age of 12 to 15, and I know this can be a little confusing because in the US, when you say college, that's after high school. But in this instance, Anna was going into what we would consider the 9th grade. The school had over 700 students. Here's a picture from the website currently, and the kids definitely look way older. It's a transition period for sure, and it was harder for her to make solid friendships. Everything was new. Kids came from different primary schools, and you have to get to know everyone all over again. And with the dawn of social media, what's important isn't just about what's real. Now children have the added pressure of appearing cool online as well as in real life. Now it's, how many followers do you have? Not, what sports do you play? Kids will find just about anything to bully others about. Some of the things that set Anna apart, for one, was that she was adopted. And that shouldn't be a big deal, but when some of her schoolmates found out that Anna didn't have real parents, she was actually teased about that. They would call her parents fake, and that made her feel like she didn't have that genuine love and connection that other kids did with their families. Sadly, Anna was having a rough time. She just wanted to be friends with everyone so badly, but she turned inward. She felt rejected, and she began to spend even more time online, where she had profiles on a number of social media sites. By the time she was a teenager, she was on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and she had her own YouTube channel. YouTube was her absolute favorite. I'm sure you know, being online opens you up to a whole new world where anonymous people think it's their right to express any thoughts that they may have. And many times, they aren't very nice. You're lucky if you've never experienced online bullying. Not all of us react the same way, and not all of us can handle it. Being so young and impressionable, many teens and preteens can take these comments to heart, and it can destroy them. Worse, it can lead to them deciding they don't want to be on this earth any longer. As much as Anna loved social media, it brought her more heartache than joy. Soon, however, Anna would go through another struggle. All of a sudden, she started experiencing extreme emotional and physical pain from a growth spurt. This was when she was around 13. She grew to 5'8". After conducting a few tests, doctors diagnosed her with Osgood-Schlatter disease, which causes swelling and irritation of the growth plate on the top of the shin bone. In most cases, it fades away when a child stops growing. But the most common symptoms of this disease are pain and swelling of the knees, and it is usually associated with growth spurts in children between the ages of 9 and 14 years old, especially if they do sports or activities that involve a lot of running and jumping, which Anna did a lot of with dance. Now there was another thing setting Anna apart from her peers, and I just told you about it. She towered over them. Many people, including her close friends, said that she looked like she was 18, not a mere 13-year-old. Being tall was looked at as odd. She's Siberian, so if she had been surrounded by other Siberian children in Russia, they may have been a lot similar. But she stood out in a crowd, and you'd think that would be a good thing. As a kid, you stand out. And standing out is not always a good thing. She wanted to belong. She was taller than her father. Not only that, but she matured faster physically. And what I mean by that is her figure. She was filling out, her hips were filling out, her chest was filling out. And with boys going through puberty, you can probably imagine how that went. Teasing, some of that may be seen as normal, like boys will be boys. But it doesn't mean it's okay, and it doesn't mean it doesn't hurt people. Soon, there were a lot of sexual comments being made towards Anna, both online and in real life. It was a lot for a young girl to deal with, especially with her new hobby of posting dancing videos on YouTube. It wasn't long before Anna actually had over 100 subscribers, and that's actually a lot, especially back then. It's not easy. She was posting regularly, sometimes doing live streams, just chatting on her camera. Her YouTube channel still exists, but all of the videos have now been privated. However, I did find some screenshots from videos that she posted. In one, she can be seen here, wearing a red shirt with the words "Femme Power" on it, basically girl power. Her hair was so wet from the shower, there was a towel on her head. She was doing her makeup while she was chatting to her viewers. You can see her with her bright pink eyeshadow and her red lip. She looked really pretty. For the most part, people had kind words to say to Anna. But unfortunately, social media creators do open themselves up to criticism and ridicule. Some creators have thick skin. They can filter through the negative posts. But Anna was naive. She was 13 years old and sheltered, and the comments on these videos crushed her. She confided in her mom about what was going on, and it's hard when something you enjoy can bring you so much pain. It's such a double-edged sword. Geraldine was very concerned. You know, times have changed. Many parents don't know how to navigate social media, and the issues that come with it can be very complicated. They don't want their child to feel alienated by taking away social media or their devices, so it's this back-and-forth delicate balance. If you take away these things, they're isolated and not allowed to experience life online with their classmates or group chats on text. They can be seen as an outcast and then bullied more. Plus, it now seemed like Anna had more connections online than in real life. So, Geraldine figured it was best not to remove social media from Anna's life, but instead she would monitor it. That seems pretty reasonable. Every night, Anna had to turn her iPhone and her tablet over to her mom and give her all the passwords so that she could log in. This was so Geraldine could go to all the sites and see what was happening. She was hoping to possibly shield her daughter from the negativity. Soon, Anna's mother was shocked by what she saw in several comments on Anna's videos. People were saying things like, "Go die." Another person said that they were going to execute her. There was all kinds of talk about poisonous barbs and weird threats. Geraldine did not know what to do. Who were these people? It can be pretty confusing because parents usually conclude it must be someone that their child knows. They're not famous, they're not a prominent YouTuber, so how else were these people finding her? But what many people don't understand is that the algorithms on these sites are made for discovery, to find new things and new people. Anyone can find you, anyone can hurt you, all while hiding behind a screen anonymously. Concerned for her well-being, Anna's parents immediately arranged for a meeting with her new teacher and the principal at her high school. They expressed their concerns that Anna was susceptible to bullying because of her insecurities, her developmental delays, her adoption, and now her online presence. They were armed with screenshots. They showed the principal and the teacher all the comments. The principal said that that would not help. They could not identify, let alone control, something that someone did online. And it only made things worse for Anna because word got around that her parents were concerned about her. Soon, her schoolmates found all of her social media profiles, and this led to even more bullying. Now it was online too. But Anna's bullying extended beyond the internet and into the real world. In October of 2017, she had been doing some charity work. She was helping out at a costume party for children, and then she was making her way back home, walking by herself. She would take long walks all the time, sometimes for hours at a time, wearing her favorite blue headphones and listening to music. But this time she came across 4 young men. They blocked Anna's path and wouldn't let her pass. They were taunting her, and then one of them grabbed her rear end. He made really inappropriate sexual remarks, literally telling her that he was going to have intercourse with her. Remember, Anna looked like a grown woman, but she was still a child on the inside, and she was terrified. She was pushing her way through the crowd of men, running home in tears, devastated. She was banging on her mom's door. She was embarrassed. She was horrified, and it took a long time that night for Anna to finally calm down. This incident upset her so much, and Geraldine and Patrick did not take this incident lightly. They went down to file a report against these young men who had harassed their daughter. In Ireland, they have one national civilian police force called Garda, which stands for Guardians of the Peace. It has 14,000 staff members and provides local and national law enforcement services. They told the Garda officers about the man who touched Anna inappropriately, and after speaking to the young man who grabbed her behind, Garda simply issued a warning. No charges were filed against him. Anna's parents were worried. They decided they would drive her to school every day and then walk her to her classes, which is not normal for a teenager her age. This again opened her up to ridicule and bullying. The same month, there was a change in Anna. There were signs. For one, Anna painted a black eye on herself. She used makeup and made it look like she had a black eye from being injured, and she went to school like this, pretending that she had been hurt. This concerned her teacher. It was a cry for attention. Her parents were called in for a meeting, and Geraldine and Patrick met with Anna's principal at the school. They believed that she was acting out how she was feeling internally. Internally, she was bruised, broken, and injured, and she was portraying this artistically, I guess, on the outside. She actually told her parents she felt invisible. It's sad because things only got worse for her as the year went on. She didn't just suffer from poor grades, but she started to get into physical fights with other students. One of these confrontations led to Anna being suspended from school. During Anna's suspension, Geraldine checked her daughter's social media accounts. She wanted to make sure that everything was okay, and that's when she saw something even more concerning than the things she had seen before. She saw something that deeply upset her. Anna's mother discovered that Anna had created a number of social media accounts. They all had different names and different profile pictures, yet they were all connected to her accounts and her email addresses. She owned and controlled these additional accounts. But it gets even more confusing and concerning when Geraldine did more digging. She realized Anna was using these accounts to comment on her own YouTube videos. Okay, maybe she wanted increased engagement or something like that. Maybe she was trying to grow her following, trying to game the system a little bit. That would be concerning, but it was much worse. Anna was using these accounts to write hurtful things about her on her own YouTube channel. She was pretending to get bullied. She would even comment on the other bullies' comments and agree with them with these fake accounts. That shocked her mother. And not only that, Geraldine found a photo on Anna's phone, a photo of Anna blindfolded and tied to a chair. What was going on here? That was beyond concerning. Parents have a tendency to feel like they don't even know what their child is doing when they're not around. Where did this picture come from? How did she get in that situation? Geraldine thought maybe, just maybe, Anna felt that the only way to bond with her peers was to do as they do and poke fun at herself under these anonymous accounts to fit in. But it was evident from Anna's comments that if she really felt this way, she didn't think very highly of herself, and that was painful for Geraldine. Geraldine was devastated that her beautiful, kind daughter felt this way. When she confronted her about that photo, Anna said, "That was just a funny prank I was doing with a friend. That's all it was, nothing serious." Geraldine wanted to understand more, and apparently, the girls thought it would be interesting to pretend that Anna had been kidnapped and was in trouble. They sent these photos to a boy that Anna liked to see if he would come rescue her. This sounds like more than a prank, but teenagers don't think like adults, right? So maybe it didn't appear to be such a big deal, but coupled with the other things they knew, Anna's parents were even more concerned, and they had reason to be. Soon, it would be too late. Anna had resorted to cutting. This is a physical way to express inner pain. She used a pair of scissors on one of her arms. Anna's parents, although concerned, kind of convinced themselves that this wasn't that severe, that she wasn't really trying to do anything bad. They thought maybe she was just copying what she saw another kid her age do, imitating him. But enough was enough at this point. They feared Anna could do something more drastic, and they wanted to get her help. Geraldine, Patrick, and Anna's principal thought that it would be wise to seek outside counseling for Anna, so they reached out to an organization called Candera Youth Services. Their website states that they are a partnership of young people, volunteers, and staff working together to respond to the emerging and changing needs of young people, their families, and communities, including youth counseling. However, when they found out about the cutting, they informed Anna's family that it was beyond their expertise and referred them somewhere else. They had them go to Piazza House, a nonprofit organization that specializes in helping people who have a tendency to cause harm to themselves or have thoughts about it. They began to do assessments to determine Anna's risk to herself. She began going to these sessions every week, and Patrick would come get her. She no longer walked by herself because of what happened with those boys and being bullied. All of this was a lot for Geraldine. She truly felt bad for Anna. She even cried because she would watch other girls walking out of Anna's class together, arms interlocked, skipping around. Then she would see Anna. She would just see her with her head down, with her headphones on, just kind of like, as she said, a ghost to everyone around her. I feel for Geraldine because that can be really tough. You just want your children to be happy. You so badly want them to be happy. Finally, after 6 sessions at the Vieta house, they determined that Anna was low risk, and she could actually go back and get those youth counseling services at the other facility. So she started getting one-on-one counseling every week, and over time, Anna did end up making a few closer friends. She would engage in sleepovers, go on outings, watch movies, and talk to friends about her boy crushes. In no time, autumn had turned into winter, and then spring, and soon Anna's first year of secondary school was almost over. On the afternoon of Sunday, May 13th, 2018, Geraldine was going to sit down with Anna to help her study for an upcoming test. This was something that the mother and daughter did on a frequent basis, especially on the weekends. Even though Geraldine worked very long hours, she always found time to help Anna with her schoolwork. But Anna insisted, "No, don't do it, Mom. You're probably so exhausted. We could do it later." Geraldine agreed this time, because they were planning a family get-together that evening at their house. So instead of studying, the mother and daughter decided, you know what? We're gonna relax, turn on the TV, put in a movie, make some popcorn, and cuddle up on the couch together. Sometimes you just need that downtime to connect and bond. After the movie was over, Anna's extended family came to the house for dinner, and all of her favorite cousins were there. Geraldine went out and ordered some pizza for everyone. However, Anna didn't eat pizza, so Geraldine, being who she was, always trying to make her happy, went out and grabbed Anna some Chinese food. It was a fun night for the kids. They were running around, having fun, and the adults were enjoying some wine and drinks together. No one in Anna's family knew that that night would be the last night they ever spent with her. There was no warning. That evening, Anna and her cousins actually went on a live stream on her YouTube channel. They titled the video, Truth or Dare. I looked to try to see if I could find what her YouTube had on it, and in the About section I read, I love to sing, dance, swim, family, and friends. If you're a hater, then please leave my account, stay strong. That's what it said in her About section. It also said that she joined YouTube on October 24th, 2016, 2 years prior to this. Her profile picture and her banner were both pictures of the sunset. Some of her previous live streams were titled, I'm So Sorry, With My Best Friends, and Tuesday Morning. She liked to do fashion and makeup videos, makeup routines, and she liked to sing and dance, like I already said. She was a typical teenager. The party ended that night, and Anna was getting ready for bed around 10:30, which was a little later than usual. She did have school the next morning. She also asked her mom, please wake me up before you go to work. Geraldine actually got up very early, and by that time, Patrick was retired, so he didn't generally wake up as early, and neither did Anna because she'd like to sleep in like most teenagers do. But she wanted to say goodbye to her mom and start her day a little earlier than usual. On the morning of Monday, May 14th, 2018, Geraldine woke up as she requested, and Anna was tired as to be expected. Although she had so much fun with her family the night before, it tired her out. But she did remember to remind her mom that she needed a note for school. She needed one of those passes that said, I'm leaving early, because that afternoon, she had a counseling appointment. Geraldine wrote the note, gave her a kiss goodbye, and had to catch a train to Dublin for a meeting. Anna finished getting ready after that, put on her school uniform, ate breakfast, packed a few things, and then left. Originally, Anna was supposed to eat lunch with her peers at school as usual, then walk to her counseling session before making her way back home. But instead, she left school and went straight home, not eating at school, eating by herself. After that, she went to her counseling session, then walked back home, changed out of her school uniform, ate a snack, and then tried to call her mom. But Geraldine was in the middle of that meeting and couldn't answer. This was around 4:02 p.m., so she texted Anna back and said, hey, I will call you as soon as I can. Patrick was outside. He was in the backyard getting some sun, relaxing. It was around 4:55 p.m. when he heard the doorbell ring. So he went to see who it was. He saw a young man around Anna's age waiting outside. He opened the door, and the boy asked for Anna. Patrick summoned her to the door, and Anna was taken by surprise. She was not expecting anyone, especially a boy, but they didn't exactly hang out. However, she seemed excited. Patrick watched as Anna stood in the doorway. She was kind of like whispering to the boy, typical teenage behavior. Then, as the young man waited, Anna excitedly ran up the stairs. She shouted to her dad that she was going to go out for a little bit. She grabbed her favorite black hoodie. She actually begged and begged her mom to buy this for her from China. It was black, and then it had white lettering down the sleeves. Before Anna left, Patrick wanted to remind her, you have studying to do. But Anna seemed to kind of brush it off. She was excited to be playing with a friend, and she told Patrick, well, I don't really know about that, and I won't be gone long anyway. Anna ran out the door. It was only a matter of seconds before Patrick realized, wait a minute, I don't know where she's going. So, he ran outside as fast as he could, and he caught a glimpse of Anna walking in the direction of a popular hangout, St. Catherine's Park. The boy was walking in front of her, wearing a small backpack, and Anna was following behind. That's the last thing he saw. Patrick wasn't worried. It wasn't typical for Anna to hang out with boys, but she was happy when she left. She was smiling when she said goodbye. Patrick wasn't worried, like I said, and the park was close by. It was frequented by many children her age, and when I say close by, for me, I don't feel like it is. But generally speaking, when I looked into it, this was a place in close proximity to the school they went to. But let me explain what St. Catherine's Park is like. There are lots of things to do there. It's a 200-acre park full of woodlands, beautiful grassy areas, and many people walk their dogs there. There's a dog park, a running trail around the river, and they hold farmers markets and events there. There are also playgrounds and picnic areas. It's a great location for people of all kinds to hang out. However, it is like a 20-minute walk. This is Anna's neighborhood. A very nice, cute place with houses and sidewalks. It's a residential area. They would come out of this neighborhood and then turn left at the church. Then they would continue walking down Captain's Hill on the sidewalk until they made their way to Main Street. Now here's more of a town square area. There's a bank on the left with shops and restaurants and things like that. They would continue down Main Street until it turns into Mill Lane. It seems complicated already, but then they take a left at Cypress Springs, and they'd only have to stay on this little road for a minute. You can see a fire station on the right-hand side on this corner, and see this? It's the entrance to the street you take to St. Catherine's. It's quite a long walk. Once you're on this small road, it's called Black Avenue. You can see it winds around up to the park, but they still would have a ways to go. And there's no sidewalks on this road. It's quite small, kind of scary looking actually. There's even a sign that warns pedestrians about oncoming traffic on some portions of the road. I did see a narrow sidewalk, but then they'd end, and sometimes there wouldn't be anything but grass or hardly a shoulder on the road. Finally, you get to the end of this road, which is one of the entrances to the park. There's a sign that says the park closes at 6 p.m. That's when the gates would close, and you wouldn't be able to drive in or out. Around 5:10 p.m., Geraldine is finally free from her meeting, and she made her way to the train station. She had just ended a phone call with a friend, so she was ready to call Anna back, but no one answered. She would be home soon, so she figured, I'll see Anna when I get there, and she didn't bother to leave a message. When she arrived, however, she didn't find Anna inside the house. She located Patrick outside and inquired about Anna's whereabouts. He informed her that Anna had left with a boy. Geraldine was pretty surprised by that. Anna was always desperately trying to make friends, so she thought it was very unusual for someone to come by and ask for her daughter, especially a boy. She definitely wanted to know more, but Patrick didn't have any other details other than the fact that Anna said she wouldn't be too long. By 5:30, Geraldine wanted Anna home. It made sense. If Anna was at the park, it would be closing soon. So she should be on her way back, so she texted Anna 2 words, home now. Anna is someone who always has her phone on her. It's almost like glued to her hand, constantly texting back within minutes, maybe even seconds. Geraldine doesn't get a response, and that worried her. Okay, Anna's only been gone a half hour. She's playing with a friend, so maybe it would take her a little longer to respond, but there's a first for everything. For the first time, her daughter isn't answering, isn't texting back or calling right away. She tells Patrick that she's actually concerned now. This next text that she sends might sound a little drastic, considering Anna didn't do anything wrong per se, but Geraldine was paranoid about her daughter, who had been bullied over the years, had ailments and impairments that made life harder for her, and had actually been harassed by boys just a month prior. She texts Anna with this: "Answer me now, or I'm calling the police." She wasn't really going to call the police. She just told Anna that because she wanted her to understand how serious it was for her to get in touch with her parents, and fast. Still no response. Geraldine decides to actually retrace Anna's steps. She's thinking, maybe I'll see her on her way back. So she walks all the way to St. Catherine's. She does see families in the park, kids, people walking their dogs, but she doesn't see Anna. With no luck, she goes back home, eats some food with her husband, and then gets in her car. She decides to go to different parts of the town, looking for her daughter. This is very out of character for Anna. She was in constant contact with her, constantly texting, always telling her where she was. Recall how much Anna was used to walking. Well, she would literally walk for hours, a couple hours at a time. So Geraldine thought she could be anywhere by now. Anywhere. Geraldine returns home again and she and Patrick go on Facebook. They're looking for connections, school connections, friends, parents, someone, a family of this boy. They were not sure who he was, so they were hoping that they would get in touch with someone who did, but they didn't have any luck with that either. It's getting late, and these parents are worried. They don't know what to do. However, they have a friend that lives nearby, a retired detective. His name is John Cribben, so they drive over because they're desperate for advice. John tells them to go to Garda and report their daughter missing. She had been gone for over 4 hours. It's 9 p.m. at this point, and she's a minor. So they frantically make their way over to Leaks with Garda Station, explaining that their 14-year-old daughter is not responding to their texts or their calls, and she's not that way. Even if she was mad, she would text back with something like, "I'm mad, I'm not talking to you," but at the very least she would let you know that she's okay. So, this was not normal. Thing is, and you've heard this before, Garda gets a number of these calls. Children that haven't made it home on time, and they usually return within a few hours. But they do still gather all the information from Anna's parents and find out that Anna's passports are in the house, and the last time she was seen was by her father, who saw her leave with a young boy around 5 p.m. Their first order of business is to locate the boy. He was the last known person to be seen with Anna. Patrick explains what the boy looked like, and he adds something. He says, when they were walking, it was more like Anna was following him. They weren't like side-by-side talking. And Geraldine makes it clear that she's even more worried. She said, "No one calls for Anna." She explained that Anna didn't have a lot of friends, especially a boyfriend. She was a loner. It didn't take long for Garda to find out who the young boy was that came to Anna's house. Garda O'Connor Muldoon was able to obtain an address for the boy. He paid him a visit that evening, and it was definitely surprising for the boy and his family to see Garda at their door. His parents asked what was going on, and the officer explained that Anna had not come home that night and that their son had been seen with her at 5 p.m. at Anna's house. Now, because we are dealing with minors in this story, the law in Ireland is strict in regard to minors and their identity being provided and revealed when it comes to anything legal in nature. Therefore, they're going to refer to him as Boy B, and we will do the same. Boy B, who is only 13, tells Garda he was the one who came to the door to ask for Anna to hang out. They did go to the park, but around 5:40, they made their separate ways back home. Boy B told Garda that he thought Anna left and she would be back at her house by now. That's terrifying. Garda officially opens a missing persons case for Anna Creel, and they begin to look for CCTV footage around the neighborhood and the park. Geraldine and Patrick give Garda pictures of Anna, including one of her wearing that unique black hoodie with the white letters going down the sleeves, the one that she was wearing when she left the house. Her parents must have been out of their minds with worry. The very next day, they're walking the neighborhood with a bunch of their friends and family. It has been overnight now, and they're asking everyone, "Have you seen Anna?" Luckily, Garda is actually able to locate footage from the area. Around 5:01 p.m., Anna can be seen on camera walking behind Boy B toward St. Catherine's Park. Then at 5:14, footage shows Anna and Boy B at the BMX track, and they seem to be leaving the park because they're near a different entrance or exit area. But then, only 15 minutes later, Anna's mom texts her, "Home now." No reply. So what happened after the BMX track? Where did the pair go? Did they go back home? It seems like Boy B did, but where was Anna? Boy B said it was closer to 5:40 when they left, but this was being captured at 5:14. So where did they go as they were seemingly headed toward one of the exits? Garda was able to locate a witness who said they saw who they thought to be Anna at the BMX track. They were having fun, skipping, walking, talking, and just hanging out. They were walking south from the BMX track on Black Avenue, And you can kind of see the top of the BMX track, right here over these hedges. This is where they would have come out from, and they would have gone towards Black Avenue and continued south. There is a closer exit out of the park at the end of Black Avenue here. Garda thinks they need to go back and speak with Boy B. They want more information. Garda thinks they need to go back and speak with Boy B. They want more information about exactly where he saw Anna go after they left the park, because at 5:49 p.m., a camera near the BMX track picks up Boy B again, all by himself, walking towards the ranger hut. Now if you look on this map, that's north, not south. So why did they leave, but only Boy B return and go back through the park? This time Sergeant John Doone goes to Boy B's home and wants to ask him if he has any more information. And luckily, Boy B does have more information. He explains that there was another friend with them that they met up with later on. He's also a minor, so we can't use his real name. We're going to refer to him as Boy A. He's also 13, like Boy B. So what they want to know is, why was Boy B walking out of the park with Anna? To understand that part, we have to go back to before he even came to the door that evening. It's a familiar story. Anna has a crush on Boy A. Boy B is Boy A's best friend. Boy A wanted to meet up with Anna, but he didn't want to go talk to her himself, so he sends his buddy Boy B to go to her house. Boy B explains that he went and picked up Anna, they went to the park, they met up with Boy A, and then afterward, Boy B went home. So the story changed a little bit, right? But we are dealing with children, so Sergeant Doone takes Boy B to the park and wants to know exact locations. Where did you enter? Where did you meet up with Boy A? And where did you both leave after that before heading back home? Boy B shows him all of the locations, and the sergeant takes notes. Now they have enough information to go public with Anna's description. They need the public's help. By Tuesday evening the 15th, they begin putting up missing persons posters, as well as articles online and on local TV media. It described Anna as 14 years old, 5 feet 8 inches in height, with black shoulder-length hair, solid skin, and a small build. She was last seen wearing a black hoodie with white writing on the sleeves, black bottoms, and black running shoes. Now it's back to the CCTV footage. They're looking for the other boy. This time, Boy B said they met up with someone else, the one that Anna had a crush on, and it doesn't take them long to spot him at 4:57 p.m. in the Courtyard Lane area of St. Catherine's Park. They see a boy wearing a backpack walking around the park area. This information is crucial because they only have 2 witnesses, these boys. The next time they see Boy A on camera is at 6:03 at the same location he came in, and at that point, he seemed to be leaving the park. So he was there about an hour. Now they make plans to speak with Boy A to gather more information about what he saw. Meanwhile, in the next couple of days, there are a lot of tips coming in. People are calling in tips, saying that they saw Anna at all kinds of different places, that she was 25 minutes away from St. Catherine's Park. Someone else said they saw her at the airport boarding a flight at Dublin Airport. But then they get a pretty promising lead. It's from a mother, and she says that she knows Anna from her daughter. Her daughter said that she saw Anna on May 15th in the morning on their street in their neighborhood with a boy who didn't attend school that day. So, could Anna have been hiding out somewhere with this young boy? Teenagers do all kinds of unpredictable things. Garda goes up to this house, and they end up doing a search of this other boy's house, this unnamed boy, and it turns out there's no connection with Anna's disappearance. I want to take you back to Sergeant Doone because he's the one that was with Boy B at the park. While they're searching, they decide to go to the railway as well as the entire park, every inch of it, and it's huge. Recall, he was about to make his way to Boy A's house. Well, while Doone's walking through the park, a man stops him. He's with another young boy, and he says, "Listen, I heard about Anna's disappearance. You should check the local sewage treatment area because my son hangs out there with kids that age." That's good information. That's an area of the park. It's actually on Black Avenue. You pass it when you're coming to the park entrance, and it looks like a dangerous place. There are lots of signs that say "do not enter," but you know how teenagers are. Sometimes, they like a thrill. Look, there's even a sign here that says "no trespassing," but you can actually walk through St. Catherine's Park on Google Maps. While I was going towards the water treatment area, I saw this bridge. There are a lot of places you can get lost in here. There are streams, rivers, swampy-looking grass areas. Anything could happen without many people seeing it. I also found an area like this where the path ends, and there are just a bunch of graffiti-covered walls and places to hide. It's off the beaten path, a kind of scary place if the sun goes down. By the afternoon of the 15th, Sergeant Dune makes contact with the family of boy A. And at this point, there's a surprising revelation. The man and the boy who Sergeant Dune passed in the park, the one who told him, "You should check out the water treatment plant," that was, in fact, boy A and his father. He informs them of the details that are known about little Anna's disappearance and instructs boy A and B to go back with him to the park again, with boy A's father following them. Now this time, boy B is going in a slightly different direction, past the BMX track. Both boys are leading Sergeant Dune and boy A's dad, right? So Sergeant Dune sees the boys kind of look at each other, exchange a little bit of a glance, which to him indicated that they were kind of disputing which way to go next. Because of this, Sergeant Dune makes a decision to stop the search. He wants to bring both of them back to the station with their parents, of course, to do a formal interview in separate rooms, more like an interrogation. This would put pressure on them to tell the truth. They're young, they're scared, they're confused, and all the officers want to know is, when did they see Anna last? They aren't in trouble, but it's imperative to understand what happened after the boys left Anna alone. At the Garda station, boy B was consistent in what he already informed them about. He didn't know what happened to Anna. He wasn't even aware that anything was wrong until Garda showed up at his door. What gets interesting is what happens when they interview boy A. He explained that boy B was his best friend. He walked to boy A's house after school, but boy A was busy with chores, so he told him, "Hey, let's go meet at the park later." Boy A says when he got there, he was surprised to see that boy B brought Anna. He told Garda that he did know her, but not that well. Then he said, "At one stage, Anna said to me, 'I have something to ask you. I was wondering if you wanted to go out with me.'" Boy A said he was surprised that it came out of nowhere. He said, "I kind of knew she liked me because she kind of asked me out before," and then he explains to Garda that he was caught off guard. He didn't want to be mean, but he wasn't interested in having a girlfriend, so he said to Anna, "I'm sorry, but I'm not interested." And she didn't answer. He said that she said nothing, and she walked off. She looked annoyed and sad at the same time. Boy A explained that boy B walked off as well, and boy A said at this time he made his way out of the park alone on his way home. That's when something happened. Two strange men confronted him. They were following him, and one of them grabbed him by the shoulder and pulled him to the ground. Then both men began to kick him. That's scary. The Garda wanted to know, who were these people? What were they wearing? Why were they doing this? How did you get them to stop? Boy A told them that finally, he was able to get away from them, and while they were down there kicking him and hurting him, he was able to kick one of them in the head, and both of the men ran off. He shows Garda his injuries. He had some marks on his arm, his leg, a cut on his face. And this was important because these men could be responsible for abducting Anna. They needed a full description, so they brought boy A to their headquarters out in Dublin, and they did a composite sketch. They created a profile of these men who attacked boy A. At this point, the search takes a turn. They now believe Anna could have been harmed or even killed, perhaps by these men. And perhaps these men saw the boys were with Anna, and they wanted to keep them from talking. So Garda also collects all the boys' clothing, shoes, backpacks, etc., and calls in even more teams. Inspector Mark O'Neill of the Lucan Garda station was now the lead detective, and they brought in special teams. They had a dive team to search all those bodies of water, including the River Liffey, as well as the civil defense team, which is kind of equivalent to emergency rescue services here in the United States. 60 members were brought in to help, as well as the Garda Crime and Security Branch. They looked over all the cell phone data and tried to find out Anna's GPS locations on May 16th, 2 days after Anna had gone missing. The search was in full force. Anna's disappearance had become a major news story throughout Ireland, and that photo of her in a hoodie became synonymous with her case. That was the picture spread around to help identify Anna and to alert anyone who may have seen her to call the authorities. A tip comes in the next evening, on May 16th. A witness says they saw a boy climbing into a field on the Lucan side of St. Catherine's Park at 5:08 p.m. on May 14th. As they put it, he was making a beeline for an area called the Glenwood House. Now recall the CCTV footage of Anna and boy B talking and walking at 5:14. While they were walking in the same direction, out of the park to a road that leads to Glenwood House. So what's Glenwood House, and why would teenagers be going there? Why would they be going there? Let me show you. This is the BMX track, and here's the field right near Glenwood House. St. Catherine's actually has several entrances, and one of them is close to this place. After passing the ranger hut and a parking lot, you can take a path through the woods and come out in the neighborhood in front of Glenwood House. At the time, in 2018, the Glenwood House was a dilapidated country manor. It used to be a 2-story mansion situated on 105 acres of farmland. It was built back in the 1800s. This home was once considered an elegant, luxurious estate, but that was then. Now it was the perfect place for teens to run amok, as they say, paint the walls with graffiti, make out with each other, kind of like a lover's lane. But it had been destroyed over the years. A section of the roof had collapsed. There had been a number of fires set by delinquents. There was debris, trash, needles, bottles. Just the premises were nasty. It draws in teens and other vagrants from all over the area. Many residents from this community wanted it to be torn down years ago, but it's a protected structure. A company purchased it for £10 million back in the early 2000s, and they wanted to make it into a nursing home, but they had planning issues, so that plan never went through. In January of the same year, 2018, there was finally an advisement panel that went out and told the developer to go ahead and finally do full repairs on the property, but nothing had been done yet. For years it just sat there, open to teens like Anna and these boys to hang out in. There had been many complaints over the years. Politician Ted Letty wrote in saying it needed to be secured, that it is a place that criminals turn up to and terrible deeds are committed. So, is this what happened to Anna? Garda fears the worst. Just look at this place. It's dangerous. It's not a place for children. It's littered with trash, all kinds of things, probably drugs. It's just bad. The next day, on Wednesday, May 17th, Garda planned a full search of the Glenwood estate, starting with the structure and then moving into the field around it. Sergeant Declan Burchell and a special search team gathered at the area outside of St. Catherine's, moving towards Glenwood. Garda was very familiar with this area, having received many calls over the years. They began an extensive search through ditches, brush, and forest areas, inch by inch, step by step, making their way to the structures. Right there in the park, you can see a wall. You climb over it and can run across the field to get to the backside of Glenwood House. That's the path they took, as a witness had seen Boy A running in that direction. Here's the path across the field and into the backyard of Glenwood House. There were some outbuildings, so a few searchers checked them. Garda's Sean White went into the main structure. This discovery sent a shock through the small community. The school Anna attended was so close to St. Catherine's Park, where many children walked daily without a care. Although incidents had occurred at Glenwood, nothing like this had ever happened. Not to a teenager like Anna. By Friday, May 18th, the Irish Times published an article titled, "Murder Inquiry as 14-year-old Girl Was Beaten to Death and Left in a Derelict Building. Priest Says Community in Shock Following Anastasia Caruso's Death." I read this article, which revealed that investigators were focusing on what happened after the two young boys had left Anna and gone home. Anna was described as a first-year student at Convey College and very popular among her peers. The article also noted that Anna had recently run a Snapchat vlog of a school sporting event. Garda was heavily investigating all her social media accounts. Anna's parents, Geraldine and Patrick, requested privacy. They wanted to shield their younger son, Aaron, from the news as much as possible. Meanwhile, the media urged anyone with information to come forward. Garda even set up roadblocks, questioning locals to link any clues to this horrific crime. Here, you can see a photo of forensic personnel entering the room where Anna was found, scouring the entire site for evidence. Anna was laid to rest on May 18, 2018, and hundreds of people attended her funeral. As her remains were transported to the crematorium by the police, the song A Whole New World played, because Anna loved Disney. She loved bright colors, and she brought brightness and color into everyone's lives. Geraldine and Patrick encouraged guests to wear sparkles, glitter, pink, green, anything fun that reminded them of Anna. A busload of Anna's classmates attended the service, along with her friends from dance class. They all wore red and white armbands in her honor. Geraldine spoke about how, even though their beautiful young daughter was taken so soon, her love would never fade. In Anna's casket, her parents placed a miniature Eiffel Tower because Anna loved France, her father's birthplace. Additionally, a Russian flag was draped over her coffin. The final item they placed in Anna's casket was a Russian nesting doll, similar to the one they had used to announce her adoption. This case is extremely difficult to go over, and now I must cover the autopsy report, which only took a day to complete. It's one of the most distressing I've read. Anna sustained over 50 injuries, bruises and cuts across her entire body, but particularly severe on her face, head, and neck. The cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma to the head and compression of the neck. Although there was a ligature around her neck, it didn't cause trauma and was likely just draped there. It was more likely pressure from someone's hands. What I'm about to discuss next is delicate. Out of respect for Anna's age, I'll speak carefully. There was evidence of injury in the pelvic region, which Dr. Cassidy, who performed the autopsy, noted could have been caused by an object or forced intercourse. Seminal fluid was also found on one of Anna's tops at the crime scene. This led Dr. Cassidy to question if the motive for the attack might have been sexual. Bruises covered Anna's legs, thighs, and torso. The doctor couldn't determine if Anna was alive or conscious when this injury occurred, but her report did help reconstruct what likely happened that day, on May 14th. It's believed Anna died the day she went missing, sometime between 5:25 and 5:40. That would have been only 10 minutes after she and Boy B were seen skipping, laughing, walking, and talking through St. Catherine's Park. Putting together the autopsy and what forensic teams found in that room, it was believed that she was ambushed as soon as she entered. She was struck with a large, heavy stick with nails protruding from both sides, and then she was hit at least 4 times with a broken concrete cinder block. It had matted hair, blood, and Anna's DNA on it. This was all determined by looking at spatter, as it was in high areas above. This indicated that Anna was initially standing when she was hit. There were what they call percussive staining on the stick, which happens when an object is flying through the air at high speed and impacts someone. These are streaks in blood that appear on walls, coming from the object flying at a fast pace. They're kind of like tiny, thin streaks, so you can tell the velocity and the speed. There was evidence that the assailant dragged Anna to a window, probably because they wanted to get some light to see what they were doing. This is where it's believed the incident, the forceful act, whether intercourse or an object, happened, because this is also where there was pooling. The pooling stains were left behind in this corner of the room as she lay there. It was apparent from her glue-on nails, strewn all over the room, that Anna clawed, punched, and fought. They collected blood evidence for DNA analysis and fingerprints from all over the scene, which was still being processed. Wow, this is unbelievably sad. Poor Anna. What could she have done? What could have happened to cause her to be in this vulnerable situation? While the Garda had doubled down on the teen boys, they were the last people seen with her. Once the authorities knew the extent of what Anna went through, they couldn't speak. The community and Anna's classmates and friends were speaking, though. They talked about Snapchat, about Anna looking like a model. One friend told the Irish Times she was the type of child who would be sending her parents text messages, telling them that she was walking to the bus stop, then another to confirm she was on the bus, and others with updates on where the bus was. That's the level of vigilance and interaction we are talking about. Another friend recalled Anna being quirky and offbeat, and that she had a love for animals, with dogs being her favorite type of pet. Anna was terribly missed, especially by her family and her close friends at her dance troupe. On March 22nd, the National Women's Council called for a review of femicides. The Women's Council wanted the government to ask why Irish men were committing these acts on women. The director, Miss Orla O'Connor, was quoted saying, "These young women were going about usual everyday things. There is nothing they could have done to prevent what happened." She also said, "We need to ask what's going wrong in our society, that these horrific crimes are happening. I want to understand this too, and that answer may not come very soon." But what was coming was an arrest in Anna's case. By May 23rd, the Garda had made it public that they were close to making an arrest due to a DNA match. Garda had been to Anna's school over the past few days, asking students a lot of questions. After reviewing all the information and DNA evidence, they were able to link and exonerate individuals from this murder. Shockwaves rocked the community the next day when an arrest was made. 2 arrests, actually. On May 24th, the Garda announced the arrest of the 2 13-year-old boys who were last seen with Anna on the day of her murder. Yes, that's right. It turned out that the story Boy A had told, that he was beaten up by 2 men, didn't seem to make sense to the authorities. Not only that, but inside Boy A's backpack was a zombie mask, black gloves, shin guards, and knee pads. When I say a zombie mask, this was a homemade mask like a ski mask. It was skin-colored, had eye holes cut into it so someone could see out, and the jaw area was cut out with sharp fangs drawn on the upper part, painted red. It was terrifying. They called this a murder kit. After looking back at that CCTV footage in the timelines, they ascertained that Boy A was wearing this exact backpack at 4:57 p.m., making his way straight to Glenwood House at 5:08. Remember, the witness actually saw him running toward that field where the house is. The DNA, in the form of seminal fluid, also belonged to Boy A. There was no doubt in the investigators' minds that he was at that house. He was at that house when Anna was killed. However, as for Boy B, Garda was not sure what role he played in the crime. Both boys' parents were notified on May 23rd that they would be arrested the next day and that their homes would be searched. The Garda asked the parents to quietly bring the boys down to the station, aiming for discretion. Boy A was to go to Clondalkin Garda Station in West Dublin and Boy B to Finglas Station, 5 miles away. In Ireland, there are strict laws regarding minors. The Children Act of 2001 is the cornerstone of the juvenile justice system in Ireland. It provides several protections for juvenile offenders, including the right to stay anonymous and the expungement of their records if certain conditions are met. Some people argue that communities and the public deserve to know who these juvenile offenders are, so they can be cautious, because even if these offenders grow up, they still committed these acts. Although I understand the intent to protect them as they mature, many feel that naming children would deter criminal behavior and hold them accountable for their actions. I have to agree. However, the Act states that maintaining anonymity is of the highest importance for young offenders, no matter how heinous the crime. The reasoning is that a child, often with multiple issues, including mental health challenges, committed the crime. Many early offenders come from chaotic backgrounds and are sometimes victims of neglect and violence themselves. In this case, the Garda didn't want to show up at the boys' homes in marked vehicles. They used unmarked cars and carried out their searches discreetly, avoiding evidence bags and trying not to alert the neighbors, which would risk exposing Boy A and Boy B's identities. Once arrested, the Garda planned to ask the boys more questions to understand their involvement. They wanted to get a sense of each boy's nature, so they started with questions that were easy to answer with the boys' parents present. These questions included, "Do you understand right from wrong?" Boy A was actually very intelligent for his age. His interests, he told Garda, were human anatomy, the human body, and the inner life of the skeleton. He said he liked drawing anatomical drawings. When detectives asked if he liked drawing people who were alive, he said no, more evolutionary. What did that mean exactly? Well, he said it was the evolution from life to death. When they confronted Boy A about Anna's blood on his boots, he literally said, "Are you joking me? You can't be serious." Then he claimed he wasn't feeling well and that he might throw up, so they gave him a glass of water. However, they weren't going to go easy on him. They asked, "Were you in that room when Anna was killed?" He responded, "No." The thing is, there was no way the blood spatter on his boots could have gotten there unless he was close to Anna when those injuries were inflicted. This wasn't blood that could have been transferred by Boy A simply walking through the crime scene. Anna's blood was also found on and inside the zombie mask in Boy A's backpack, as well as on his knee pads, gloves, and the backpack itself. When Boy A came home that evening, on the night of the crime, his mom didn't know what had happened. She believed his story that he had been beaten up by two men, so she admitted to Garda that there was blood on her son's clothing that night, but she ended up innocently washing it, not realizing it was evidence of a murder. There's more. Boy A handed over his cell phone to the authorities. When investigators looked through it, they found some disturbing photos, screenshots, and search history. Some content could be written off as innocuous, just things a curious teen might do or look at. However, certain screenshots and parts of Boy A's internet history were valuable to investigators. Boy A's YouTube search history included videos such as the 15 most gruesome torture methods in history and horror films that will blow everything away. Other disturbing searches included, "Until Dawn, take Jessica's clothes off." This last one caught my interest because Until Dawn is a PlayStation video game that Boy A used to play. The game features a character, Jessica Riley, who can remove her clothing depending on her relationship level with one of the male characters. She can undress to her white shirt, jeans, or underwear. Clearly, Boy A was interested in getting her undressed. The searches that stood out most to Garda were abandoned places in Lucan County near St. Catherine's Park and Greenwood House. Wow, I wonder why he searched that. But wait until you hear what they found next. Boy A had 2 more devices hidden in his room. These phones contained over 12,500 images. Of what, you may ask? Very explicit and violent acts against women. Investigators found very inappropriate content involving underage individuals doing, you know what? These were the 4-letter P-word searches, underage, if you know what I mean. That word was actually searched on 2 separate devices. There were also pictures of a man wearing a mask while he was dominating young women in school uniforms. Oh my God, this boy is literally 13. What is going on? Other images were of women bound and gagged. He even searched Sweet Russian Teen. He started searching that from November 2017 and continued until the murder. He was looking for images and videos of these indecent things. And I'm stunned, it's his age that's so shocking to me. A grown man? Okay, but what in the world are we, because, I'm a parent too. What are we opening up our children to online? These things are at our children's fingertips. Of course, Garda confronted Boy A about the searches. He said all that stuff came up because he was merely searching for a horror film online and wasn't interested in any of the other content. According to him, and maybe not at first, I think that could be true. Curious minds may not resist the urge to look. Being such a young and impressionable boy, his mind may have become distorted as a result of this exposure. Even with all the evidence presented to Boy A, he denied having anything to do with Anna's murder. Now I want to take you to Finglas Station with Boy B. In his interview, he had been questioned a total of 5 times prior to this arrest, and in the last one, he admitted he heard Anna scream. He had been giving Garda bits and pieces, gradually revealing details, though they had to pull it out of him. One thing, though, none of his DNA was linked to the crime scene, and none of Anna's DNA was found on any of his belongings, anywhere in his house or elsewhere. While being interrogated by Garda, Boy B admitted he watched Anna enter Glenwood House and go into the room with Boy A. He said Boy A was his best friend and initially told Boy B that he was interested in meeting up with Anna because she had a crush on him. It turns out that was all a plan to get Anna alone. But Boy B claimed he had no idea what Boy A's intentions were and thought they were maybe going to kiss or something. Once Boy A and Anna went into that room, Boy A told Boy B to leave. Boy B didn't leave though. He decided to explore this historic home. He said he was looking around when he heard a shuffling noise and screaming. This made him turn back and run to the room, where he saw Boy A flip Anna into the air in what he described as a judo-type move. While Anna was on the ground, Boy A got on top of her and began, well, everything you already know. Items were being ripped off her, and the whole time she was screaming, saying no and don't do this. That poor girl, I can't even begin to imagine her fear. And it only got worse. Boy A put his hands around her neck. Suddenly he must have heard a noise, because Boy A and Anna both turned and looked at Boy B, who was standing in the doorway. Boy B said Boy A had a blank stare on his face, and it scared Boy B, so he ran away. With all this information, Garda went back to Boy A and confronted him. He claimed, Boy B is lying, that's all. But it didn't matter. The evidence they had on Boy A was enough to charge him with Anna's murder. The very next day, on May 25th, at 4:01 p.m., 10 days after Anna's murder, he was officially charged. An hour later, he was transported with his parents to the Children's Court in Dublin for his first court appearance. What would his parents be thinking right now? I'd be in utter shock and disbelief. I truly wonder if there were any signs. Boy A's parents did say that on the evening of the murder he looked shocked and scared when he got home, but they were both under the impression that he was the victim of two men. Boy A was the youngest person charged with murder in the history of the state. Any cases brought to Children's Court involving forcible acts or murder get transferred to Central Criminal Court, where juveniles are actually tried as adults. After the first hearing with a judge, they sent Boy A to Oberstown Detention Campus, located in Lusk, Dublin. It wasn't until July 8th that Boy B was arrested again in connection to the case. He had been released at the time Boy A was charged, but now he was back at the Garda station being questioned again. This time, they wanted to know about the mask, and Boy B talked about it being a really cool mask that Boy A had made last Halloween. Boy B did admit that he saw Boy A wearing it when he went after Anna, but it was what Boy B admitted to talking about with Boy A a month prior that was the most damning. The exchange went like this. Boy A asked him, "Hey, you want to kill someone?" Boy B said no. Boy A said, "Why not?" Boy B replied, "Because it's expletive." Boy A responded, "Oh, come on." Boy B asked, "Who are you planning on killing?" Boy A answered, "Anna Creel." And Boy B replied, "In your dreams." That's seriously so sick. Garda asked Boy B why he didn't tell on his friend, and he said, "Oh, well, I just thought he was messing around because, he always was saying things like that." Boy B said he had no idea what his friend was planning on doing on May 14th. But the real question Garda wanted answered was this. You were there. You saw Boy A hurting Anna, so why didn't you run for help? Boy B said he was scared and wasn't sure what to do, that his brain just froze in place. The next day, he tried to pretend it didn't happen, which is why he lied to Garda. He thought Boy A would blame everything on him, especially since he was the one who had gone to get Anna from her home. What I found sad was that Garda bluntly said to him, "You could have saved her." Boy B replied, "I know." Then they asked, "Why didn't you save her?" And he said, "I don't know." I know it can be scary, but Boy B said that Boy A often said odd things. So why not come forward earlier? Those are definitely signs. It's not a joke to say you're going to kill someone. There's nothing funny about it. I think parents need to be more clear about this. The detectives didn't go easy on Boy B. Not at all. They called him a liar and essentially used what he'd just mentioned against him. They said, "You heard Boy A talk about murder, specifically murdering Anna Creel by name. Then you actually do what he asks. A month later, you fetch him the exact girl, and you deliver her to her fate, putting her in the hands of a person you know wanted to kill her, under the guise that her crush wants to hang out with her. It's pure evil." Boy B was released at that time until Garda could speak with the prosecutor. Armed with everything they had at this point, they decided to rearrest Boy B on July 12th and charge him with Anna's murder as a co-accuser. But get this. Both boys got out on bail just a month later while awaiting trial. I don't agree with that at all. There was public outrage, not only because they could spend the summer with their families, but also because their identities were being hidden. Many people believe that if you do the crime, especially one as heinous as this, you should live with the consequences, like a scarlet letter. You should have to own your crime publicly and deal with what comes with it. But as I said, the law in Ireland is strict. They believe in giving young people a second chance to possibly be rehabilitated and live a normal life without the sins of their youth following them into adulthood. I'm not sure I agree. Here's a picture of a lady giving 2 middle fingers to a vehicle transporting boy A and boy B to their court hearing. The judge had to warn the public that if anyone tried sharing the boys' identities, they would face charges, especially on social media. Names, home, school pictures, anything with identifying factors should not be published, or they would face prosecution. Meanwhile, both sides, the prosecution and the defense, were doing their due diligence, looking into these boys' backgrounds. Unlike typical offenders in cases like this, both boys came from very good homes, had no history of violence, did well in school, and had no known mental health or medical issues. This really shocked the community. Prosecutors argued there was no way boy B wasn't complicit. He was the one who brought her to this dirty, abandoned farmhouse so far away from everything, knowing that boy A, his best friend, didn't like Anna. Information had come out from boy B himself that boy A told him he planned on telling Anna he wasn't interested in dating her. So why then would he say he thought boy A was maybe just going to kiss Anna? The prosecution actually believed that boy A was lying in wait for boy B to deliver Anna to him, armed with a stick and ready to render her unable to move. Mr. Justice Paul McDermott was assigned to preside over this case, with criminal barrister Brendan Green prosecuting for the state. The attorneys for the boys attempted to get separate trials, arguing that having separate trials would mean each boy's statements and evidence couldn't be used against the other. However, the judge denied that request. He explained, it would be a distortion of the factual background if the entire factual matrix of what happened in the lead-up to the death of Anna Creel was not set out in full to the jury. The trial was set for April 30th, 2019, and the judge permitted the children's parents to sit next to them during the trial. However, it would not be open to the public. Only a small number of seasoned, vetted journalists from reputable news stations were allowed in court. A lot more was uncovered in preparation for and during the trial. For one, boy B was seen by a child psychologist and ultimately diagnosed with PTSD from what he witnessed. His attorneys planned to use this as a defense, arguing that this was why he lied in nearly every interview. But what was even more unsettling was that boy B told his doctor that he actually saw boy A standing over Anna with his pants undone and admitted to seeing Anna gasping, then going silent and lifeless. This information was very damning, as it suggested boy B watched the events unfold, possibly until Anna was already dead, and yet he continued to lie, even up until he was charged. A jury of 8 men and 4 women was selected, and when the trial began, Anna's parents, Geraldine and Patrick, never missed a single moment. Despite how difficult it was to hear about the terrible things done to their daughter, they wouldn't leave, not even for a second. Even when they were thirsty, they had a victim support representative bring them a drink because they didn't want to miss anything. The prosecution's case began with a claim that boy A and boy B had planned the attack on Anna. They said boy A waited in Glenwood House with his murder kit backpack, and poor innocent Anna, who had a crush on boy A, was used as bait to get her to the house. Then boy A attacked and murdered Anna once she was inside. Interestingly, the jurors were not allowed to view any pictures of Anna alive, which I found curious. If anyone works in the legal field in Ireland, please let me know why this is. It felt as though the jury only got to see evidence of the crime without being able to humanize the victim. However, Anna's parents were able to paint a very accurate picture of her with their words. They were among the first to take the stand, sharing everything I already mentioned and more. Dr. Cassidy, the medical examiner, took 40 minutes to describe all of Anna's injuries. Geraldine took copious notes the entire time, holding her husband's hand. Interestingly, both boys were excused from the courtroom during the doctor's testimony due to the graphic nature of the evidence. I found this puzzling. They caused it, at least boy A did, so why should they be shielded from seeing what they did? On day 15 of the trial, Boy B had a panic attack and was taken away by ambulance. I couldn't help but wonder, was he simply a boy who picked the wrong crowd or the wrong friend, or was there more to it? Throughout the trial, Boy A was often seen with his head on his father's shoulder, while Boy B held his mother's hand. I wondered if this was a ploy to make them appear more innocent. However, the real reason the trial was so lengthy was due to an incident that happened around the time of Boy B's panic attack. The defense attorney informed the court that someone in the courtroom had been staring at Boy B's family. They were distressed about it, and as a result, the court decided to end around 2 p.m. instead of the usual 4:15 p.m. every day, to make sure the defendants' families felt more comfortable. You know who can't stare at anyone anymore? Anna. She can't look into her parents' eyes and tell them she loves them ever again. Both Boy A and Boy B's parents took the stand, sharing what it was like in the days leading up to the murder. They didn't try to use this time to argue their son's innocence, but Boy B's father did say he believed his son was not capable of a crime like this. 7 children testified, which is very uncommon. These were the individuals who knew the most about Anna's life, her friends, schoolmates, and even kids who knew the defendants. I was honestly impressed by Ireland's legal system. Despite the trial's complexity, it was extremely organized and ran smoothly. Defense counsel Patrick Gageby for Boy A and Damien Colgan for Boy B chose not to question any witnesses or conduct cross-examinations. They waited until all the evidence was presented before offering their arguments. Boy A's defense argued that he came from a stable, loving home, had no prior criminal record, and no history of mental illness. Still, they acknowledged the amount of evidence against him and didn't deny that Boy A killed Anna. Instead, they claimed that Boy A and Anna had gotten into an argument after she told him she liked him. The defense suggested that while Boy A tried to turn Anna down politely, things escalated and Boy A snapped during an emotional moment. They argued he had no intention of killing her, and it wasn't premeditated. During the trial, Boy A displayed no emotion, and while in custody, a psychiatrist concluded he did not have a mental illness. As part of his defense, Boy A's attorney asked Geraldine if Anna was sexually active, to which she replied with a resounding no. This was confirmed by medical evidence. The attorney seemed to be implying something, possibly suggesting that Anna was already active, but it felt completely inappropriate in this case. Boy A also maintained that he didn't have intercourse with Anna, and offered an alternative explanation for how his DNA ended up on her shirt, though those details remain unrevealed. The defense questioned several Garda officers, pressing them on why a specialist wasn't used to interview the boys and why they didn't allow more breaks. This was an attempt to cast doubt on the reliability of the evidence gathered, implying it was obtained inappropriately. However, Garda officers had followed all protocols and had ensured the boys' parents were present, so the defense's claims fell flat. Boy B's defense argued that he was intelligent and often scored higher than average on exams, but was bullied by Boy A into participating in the crime. They claimed Boy B believed Boy A was only interested in talking to Anna and thought he was joking when he mentioned killing her. According to Boy B's defense attorneys, he had no idea he was leading her to her death. The defense also argued that Boy B lied to police due to PTSD from witnessing Anna's murder. I think Boy B's panic attack stemmed from the prosecutor's rebuttal evidence. Boy B's interviews were used to show he was dishonest, but it also became evident that he didn't like Anna. This part is especially heartbreaking. Boy B said Anna was weird, an outcast, and dressed badly, adding that nobody liked her. Anna's parents had to sit in court and listen to Boy B say these terrible things about their beloved daughter. I may never see this boy's face, but based on what he said, I feel that anger many of you might feel too. The frustration with his heartlessness and the pain his words added to the already overwhelming grief Anna's family is enduring. Of course, there were questions about whose idea it was for Anna to meet up with them, who decided to have Boy B go get her, who decided to meet at the farmhouse, who brought what was at the Glenwood house, especially the tape, and how did Anna's clothing get removed, and who smashed her phone when it started to ring. The defense really tried to get a lot of evidence withheld, anything that made their clients look bad. For Boy A, it was all about trying to exclude as much of that forensic evidence as possible. For example, the key evidence, the stained boots. The defense said, those were taken under false pretenses. You were trying to figure out who beat up Boy A. They said the same thing about the phone, that it was taken inappropriately. But the Garda agents didn't even know that Anna was dead at the time, so these arguments failed. However, there was a lot that this jury never got to see, and I want to tell you about some of those things because I find them to be very interesting. One was a mannequin dressed in the clothes that Boy A was wearing the day he killed Anna. The judge decided it was way too prejudicial. There was a notebook that Boy A was drawing in. He drew a figure with a skull and the words "just kill them" and "just Ethan do it." That was also not allowed to be admitted. There was a questionnaire that Boy A filled out in one of his classes, and the prosecution really wanted to show this to the jury. They thought that the answers were very telling. Let me read it to you because I think the answers are interesting too. The questionnaire said, "Where are some of the places you like to hang out?" Answer: abandoned places. Favorite books: horror. Favorite sports: combat. Favorite movies: horror and comedy. Favorite music: rap and heavy metal. Single or taken? Single. I would describe myself as crazy, funny, adventurous. I am strange. When it said I think, he said differently. I feel, not much. I hope to do well in life. I feel angry when someone tries to annoy me or hits me. I love steak and drawing. I hate homework. The defense argued that a lot of teens would answer those questions the exact same way, and ultimately the judge ruled that only one question and answer were to be allowed, and that was the one about where he liked to hang out. Abandoned places. Whether to let in the vast amount of indecent images found on Boy A's phone, those almost 13,000 images, was what the defense and the prosecution argued about the most. The prosecution didn't even want all of those photos. They wanted 10 that they thought depicted the type of acts and the nature of the acts carried out on Anna. There was even a video showing another Russian girl named Anastasia, and the defense argued it was way too prejudicial. I don't care if it's unfair, your client shouldn't have been doing it. But that's not how the rules work, and in this case, the judge determined it was not admissible. It was prejudicial because there was also a 6-month gap between when those things were searched and looked at and the murder. What else was left out, you may ask? Well, a video of Boy B that was on Boy A's phone showed Boy B hitting a stone block with a reinforced stick, and Boy A was saying, "Holy," that's seeing the damage that it did. Also, Boy B's internet history contained searches for various types of knives and for a YouTube video titled "My Girlfriend Tortured, Stabbed, and Starved Me." He also had a notebook that had some very interesting satanic cult information written down. These were rules according to Boy B, rules of the satanic cult as well as members' names, which included the name of Boy A. Some of the rules were: only pledge hosts can give pledges, don't talk about it, act normally, like nothing happened, no talking about Jesus or God, only Satan. Boy B said this was actually a homework assignment, but Garda thought otherwise. May 14th was a special day for Satan worshippers. It's called Doomsday, and they confronted Boy B about this. It's on the satanic calendar, but Boy B insisted he had no idea, and ultimately it was confirmed that this was a homework assignment. They had a homework assignment about cults, and Boy B's work was associated with this evidence, so it was not admitted. Even without getting in a lot of the more prejudicial and damning evidence, the prosecution still had a lot on Boy A. The CCTV footage of him at the park, his DNA on Anna's shirt, and her blood on his things, as well as his shoes. What the jury was left with was the prosecution's story of what they thought happened. It really reminded me of what happened to 13-year-old Tristan Bailey by Aiden Fucci, who was 14 at the time. This happened in Jacksonville, Florida. He too had mentioned to his friends that he wanted to know what it felt like to kill someone, but no one came forward. Then he did it. He killed poor Tristan by luring her into the woods under the pretense that he liked her. So back to this case. The jury was repeatedly reminded in reference to Boy B that it was not a crime to merely be at the scene, and failing to stop a murder isn't a crime either, according to this court. On June 12, 2019, The jury began deliberations, and 5 days later, they announced their verdicts. In the case of Boy A, he was found guilty of murder and aggravated forced intercourse. The jury found Boy B guilty of murder, despite the lack of physical evidence linking him to the crime, and rightfully so. Boy B, they believed, was responsible for Anna's murder, since she would have never gone to the Glenwood house if it wasn't for him and the lie that he told her to get her to go with him. Anna was happy. She had a big smile on her face the last time she saw her father. She really believed that Boy A liked her and wanted to date her, not that he wanted to kill her. The sentences for Boy A and Boy B were handed down on July 15, 2019. For the first count of murder, Boy A received a life sentence. However, after 12 years, a review panel will look at his file, and they can either shorten his sentence or extend it. Since he was a minor when the crime occurred, he was also sentenced to 12 years for aggravated forced intercourse. It goes by another name, which I can't say, which the judge ordered to be served concurrently with his life sentence. If and when Boy A is released from prison, he must be registered as an offender. Boy B was sentenced to 15 years in prison, and a panel will review his file in 8 years, and they can decide to lessen his sentence as well. Even after the boys both turn 18, neither one of their identities will ever be revealed, which I think is uncool. But who am I? Anna's life and brutal death were displayed to the world, while Boy A and Boy B have protection at all costs. The entire trial, well, someone else thought it was uncool that the boys' identities weren't known to the public, and out of anger, after Boy A and Boy B were sentenced, Hazel Fitzpatrick, a 25-year-old mom of 2, revealed the boys' identity online because Anna was not protected. She felt it was unfair that the boys were. According to an article in the Irish Mirror, Hazel posted a screenshot on Facebook of a photo that identified the boys on the day that they were convicted of this murder. The post said, "Name and shame the C-words. Justice was served, but they should not be allowed to see daylight again. Sickos." And she said that everyone should see who did it. However, she faced a trial over this. Even though she deleted the post within minutes, she was still charged with violating Ireland's Children Act of 2001. Hazel's trial was in 2021. Her lawyer said that at the time, Hazel was almost like addicted to social media, and she did it out of a burst of anger. There was no premeditation. And when she posted the photo of Boy A on Facebook, she even stated it was the biggest mistake that she ever made in her life. But she pleaded guilty, and the judge described Hazel's actions as having utter contempt for the law and handed down a 12-month sentence. However, it was reduced to 8 months on the condition that she was able to keep the peace for that period. There were a lot of people who got in trouble for revealing these boys' identities, and I wanted to go into a few. You don't have to know this if you don't want to, but I thought it was very interesting, and I still have a few more things to say. There was a journalist who was fined about £3,000 for accidentally naming the boy during one of the live radio broadcasts. The court was also told that there was another boy who wasn't even involved in the murder, and he was wrongly identified online as one of the killers. I thought this was really cool. Both Facebook and Twitter apparently have face-matching technology, and they have the actual photos of Boy A and Boy B. Within seconds, they can detect a post that has their images in it, and it will be removed immediately, within minutes. This has been done over the years. By 2020, at least 10 people were accused of illegally posting pictures or names of Boy A and Boy B. There were 6 men and 4 women prosecuted, including a mother of 3 who was 48 years old, a 22-year-old who posted on Twitter. All kinds of people decided that it was unfair to keep these 2 young men's identities hidden. But one of the most publicized posts came from Rebecca Ryan. She was 25, and she tweeted the 2 minors along with the caption, "Here's Boy A and Boy B, the 2 murdering bastards." All the people were fined or imprisoned as a result of identifying Boy A and or Boy B. As for the house, the Glenwood house, it has since been completely sealed up with cement and cinder blocks. People can no longer get inside, but there have been many who have tried. A lot of people visit it as a murder house, like a house of horrors, like a tourist attraction. However, it is not being demolished, and apparently the owner said that due to its notoriety, it will no longer be able to be a nursing home as planned. Here's what it currently looks like on Google Maps as of March 2022. Egypt Covington had everything. She was a popular singer in Michigan, had just landed her dream job, bought a new car, and was dating the man of her dreams. All of that was taken away one summer night when she was in her apartment alone, watching a movie. Egypt was in the right place at the wrong time, and all of her dreams were ripped away. I want to introduce you to a girl named Egypt. Jacqueline Elizabeth Egypt Covington was born on July 19, 1989 in Michigan, to her father, Charles Chuck Covington, and her mother, Tina Marie Turner Covington. Egypt had a very big blended family, with lots of step and half siblings. Her parents, Chuck and Tina, divorced when she was young, but she maintained a very close relationship with both of them, as well as with all of her sisters and brothers. Now I tried to keep track of each and every one of them, and from what I could gather, there were 3 other girls in the family: Jordan, Beth, and Jessica. Jessica was very close in age to Egypt. I found a picture, a really cute picture of both of them from Halloween as children, and they looked like twins. I also counted 3 brothers, Dejuan, Samuel, and Dwayne. Egypt was a name that Jacqueline chose. That is how her family and her friends knew her, so I will be calling her Egypt as well. Her dad, Chuck, remarried to a woman named Kristen when Egypt was around 12 years old. Egypt was very close to Kristen, who was also known as Chris. They were a very close family. They had a lot of fun together. They just seemed to be people who were accepting, loving, and supportive. One thing that Egypt's whole family and all of her friends were supportive of was her passion for singing. This woman was born to sing. Her voice gave me chills. Her voice would resonate through a room and touch each and every person there. She moved people with her singing, and she was going places. The people around Egypt didn't have a doubt. They knew that she was going to be famous one day. It was just who she was. She was absolutely gorgeous as well, and very unique. No one else had what Egypt did. There was just something so special about her. When I looked at pictures of her, I could feel it. Her smile, those soulful eyes, her face. It just told a story, and she didn't even need to speak. You could feel it through her photos. She had one of the biggest and brightest smiles, so genuine. And as I was going through everything, researching this case and trying to find out who Egypt was and what people said about her, time and time again, I would read the same thing: that she was the type of person you could not take your eyes off of. It wasn't just the way she looked. She didn't even need a microphone. She was one of those people that just commanded a room because she had a big personality, and that personality would fill the room before she would even get into it. When she made that presence, people would flock toward her. They wanted to be around her, just to get some of that energy for themselves, just to feel it. So it's probably no wonder she found herself in a job where she could use a personality like hers. She followed in her big brother Dwayne's footsteps and became a bartender alongside him. It was one of her first real jobs. Dwayne taught her the ropes. They would even have this little show that they put on together where they were side by side behind the bar. He taught her all of his tricks, and I'm talking, they would come out there, dim the lights, throw flaming bottles of liquor into the air, and it was fun. It attracted regulars to the bar, who would come to see them time and time again, to see Dwayne and his sister, Egypt. But a lot of people say it was mostly for Egypt. She was the star of the show, not only at the bar, but also on stage. Egypt would frequently enter singing competitions, like the one she did in 2014 at Country Idol. This is a really popular competition in Eastern Michigan, and she was so confident on stage. It wasn't even about confidence in her ability to sing or being the best singer. It didn't matter. It didn't matter if she sounded good or if she didn't sing well that night. She was going to sing, and that's what mattered. She was going to own it. She was gaining a lot more recognition, which built her confidence. At this point, she decided she really wanted to put forth more effort into becoming a recording artist, so the next step was to audition for The Voice. She started to record some music with a producer named Mr. Peace, and he thought that she was amazing. He saw a lot of potential in her. He has a YouTube channel, and there are a couple of videos that feature Egypt. She just knew how to command an audience, to make them feel something, time and time again. Anytime I would read anything about what it was like to be there when she sang, people would explain that it made them feel something. You can tell just how passionate Egypt was about singing. She didn't just command an audience on the stage, she also did that at her bartending job. She had a lot of friends who were also in the industry. Her goal at that point in life, while bartending, wasn't just to be a bartender. She wanted to work her way up and land a job at a beer and wine distribution center. Meanwhile, she was working and living in a town called Belleville, just outside Detroit in eastern Michigan. I wanted to tell you a little about Belleville. According to BellevilleOnTheLake.com, they describe their community as nestled on the peninsula shores of beautiful Belleville Lake, a picturesque setting with tree-lined neighborhoods and a traditional downtown on the lake, enhanced by beautiful parks. It's a small town. The population was just under 4,000 people in 2010. Now there is something that's going to be important here, which I had to learn about. Belleville is part of a township. I didn't know what that was. The township is referred to as the Van Buren Township. And the way that I can explain this the best way that I can is that it's almost like its own government. So even though Belleville is in Michigan, it falls under the control of the Van Buren Township. More on that later, but I wanted to add I was going through Egypt's Facebook, and I learned so much about her. I went all the way back to 2009. She was someone who liked watching Weeds and Nip Tuck. She despised waking up early sometimes, and she thought her online classes in college sucked. It's like when we used to put up Facebook statuses, when it would just say, like, your name, and then you had to fill in the blank, like, Kimber is feeling blank. So she does also talk about loving yoga, going for a run, loving her little dog Ruby, who's a little pug chihuahua mix, and she even talks about losing a friend and going to their funeral. She loves to read tarot cards, and on this post on June 7th, 2010, which is actually my birthday, she said, "I just found my debit card that I've been missing for over a week. Just canceled it 2 days ago, and now I have to wait 4 days to get a new one." It sounds like me, and it maybe even sounds like you. I really think all of us can relate to someone like Egypt. In 2010, Egypt was working at an assisted living facility, sometimes even working the midnight shift. This just goes to show you the kind of person she was. She was compassionate and caring, she devoted her time to others, and she carried that with her throughout her entire life. She was also a big fish in a very small pond. She was very popular in her town. She was well known and sought after, definitely popular with the men. She wasn't shy about dating and had her fair share of relationships, and maybe even some more casual encounters as well. A typical young woman, living her best life. Everyone around town knew Egypt. Like I said, she lived in Belleville, Michigan. That's where she was born and raised, and it also became her final resting place. Now that you know a lot about Egypt and what kind of person she was, I want to tell you what life was like for Egypt in 2017 when she was living at 45576 Huron River Drive in Van Buren Township, Michigan. She really loved where she lived when she first moved in. It's a little house. I'm going to show it to you right here. Now it looks like it's just a house because it has this one door, but it's actually a duplex. When you go through that front door, there are 2 other doors on either side of a hall. One's on the left and the other is on the right. Each one of those doors goes to their own unit. Egypt's unit was on the left, and the unit on the right was occupied by a couple named Steve and Megan and their child. Megan's father owned the duplex. And even though Egypt really did like living here at first, there came a time when she didn't. There were definitely a couple of reasons, or maybe more, that she was planning to move out in July of 2017. One of the reasons that she told her mother was that there was a lot of traffic coming in out of Megan and Steve's unit. When I say traffic, I'm just going to be blunt. They sold drugs. Legally, though, according to what I read, marijuana. They were running a medical marijuana business from the duplex. That was just part of their lifestyle and the business they ran. as well as breeding dogs, bulldogs, so they had a bunch of little bulldog puppies for sale all the time. Living there just kind of ran its course, and Egypt was ready for something different. Not to mention the fact that she had recently gotten back with an ex-boyfriend of hers named Curtis Meadows. So there's something you should know about Egypt and Curtis. Well, they had dated about a decade before this, when Egypt was about 20 years old, and Curtis was 28. They met back in 2008, and they had an on-again, off-again relationship, back and forth and back and forth. When they met, she was working at a local bar, and he came in one night. It was around the corner from where he lived, and he saw her, and as cliché as it sounds, it was like love at first sight. All of her friends knew right away. She also had a major crush on Curtis. She was just absolutely smitten by him. So they dated for about 2.5 years, but then there was a problem. It was their schedules. Curtis had a young daughter at the time, and he had the 9-to-5 type schedule where he had time to come home and cook dinner and eat dinner at the table, whereas Egypt, being younger and a bartender, had a schedule that wasn't concrete. It fluctuated. Sometimes, she might get home early, but then many times she would get home after midnight. That's just bar life. You could be strolling in at 2, even 3 o'clock in the morning or later. It just didn't fit Curtis's lifestyle, and as hard as it was, they ended up breaking up. It was not a good breakup because Curtis really broke Egypt's heart. But it was also easy to say this relationship wasn't that great, even as much as Egypt really loved Curtis. She would tell her friends all the time that they would get into screaming matches, and she would show up at her friend's door at 2 o'clock in the morning, just crying her eyes out. I mean, I know I've been there. I think we've all been through something like this while growing up. Maybe you're going through it now. So it was probably best that they did part ways at the time. But this wasn't the last time they would get together, and it wouldn't be the last time that they broke up. They dated a few times between 2008 and 2017, but this time it was for real. Egypt was 27 and Curtis was about 35 years old. They were ready. Egypt could not be happier because everything was coming together for her. The year before, on February 29, 2016, she finally landed her dream job. She became an account manager for Rave Associates, which is a beer and wine distribution company in Michigan. Craft beer is a big business in Michigan, and Egypt had a genuine love for craft beer. Now that she was in this new position at her job, she could visit all of her favorite local bars and restaurants, and use her knowledge and her love to showcase all of the new and exciting products that Rave Associates had to offer for these establishments. She was also working on her music career. She just got a new car, she finally landed the guy that she was madly in love with, and they were planning on moving in together in early July. Why does it always seem like bad things happen when people think that they've finally got everything together in their life? Isn't that ironic? Just when she thought it couldn't get better, it got worse. Way worse. Unbelievably worse. Because the last time the love of her life would ever talk to her was the night of June 22nd, 2017, just a few weeks before Curtis and Egypt were going to move in together. He sent his last text at 10 o'clock p.m. Curtis said good night and that he loved her, and Egypt responded with nighty-night. Just a typical Thursday night. Egypt had spent the evening doing yoga with a few of her friends, and she decided to head home around 9 o'clock. She texted with Curtis and told him good night, and then she chatted with her friend Lindsay. Guess what they talked about? The big move with Curtis that would actually never happen. Like many couples, Curtis and Egypt kept in touch a lot through text. So the next morning, he did his usual check-in with a good morning text, just saying something like, "Good morning, my love." She didn't respond, which wasn't like her, because it usually only took about 10 to 15 minutes for her to get back to him. But of course, no one's going to be freaking out if someone doesn't return their text the first couple of times. They could be busy, they could be getting ready for work, they could be at work. And that's what Curtis figured as well. Then throughout the day, Curtis was checking in again and again, and she still wasn't responding. So at that point, he had to think of another reason why. In his mind, he thought, maybe she left her phone at home. Curtis was not big on social media. He actually didn't have social media, so he couldn't exactly go check on her because he didn't have Instagram or Facebook. He had to do what many of us did before modern technology: wait. So he planned on going by her apartment later. That still didn't stop him from continuing to text her and say, "Are you okay? Where are you? What's going on?" That type of thing. Now, at some point throughout the day, he did reach out to one of his friends, and he said, "Hey, can you check social media?" He wasn't sure whether it was Snapchat or an Instagram post, but his friend said that she hadn't posted since the night before. So I went through her Instagram. I'm pretty sure this is the post right here. It looks like it could have been from when she was taking the yoga class that evening. You can see this post is from June 22nd, 2017. Here's what the caption says. It's a quote. It says, "And so with the sunshine and the great bursts of leaves growing on the trees, just as things grow in fast movies, I had that familiar conviction that life was beginning over again with the summer." F. Scott Fitzgerald. This is a very eerie caption to leave as your very last post on Instagram, considering what you're about to hear happened to Egypt. That night was indeed summer, and depending upon what you believe in, maybe Egypt's life was beginning over. But as far as what we consider life here on Earth, that ended for Egypt that night. It's just that no one knew it yet. Once Curtis got off work, he was having a late-in-the-week Father's Day dinner with his daughter. When they wrapped up, he decided to drive over to Egypt's. He tried calling her again and there still was no answer. When he finally turned down her street, and I'm going to show it to you right here, and by the way, this was not a very populated area, he just had a bad feeling. He felt like there was something wrong. It just didn't feel right. When he saw her car, he thought it was very odd that she wouldn't be answering, but she was inside. So then he thought, maybe she's just been mad at me all day long. But something is wrong. Curtis parked his truck, got out, and made his way to the front door. When he arrived, he noticed something strange. The door was open, about 5 inches wide. Hesitating for a moment, he stepped through and made his way to Egypt's front door. As he pushed it open, the first thing he saw was Ruby, Egypt's beloved dog. But Ruby wasn't acting like her usual self. Normally, she was a bundle of excitement, bouncing up and down, eager for attention, licking anyone who came through the door. But today, Ruby's demeanor was different. Her tail was tucked between her legs, and she circled around Curtis's feet, almost as if she was trying to lead him somewhere. Her barking was urgent, not joyful. Curtis started calling Egypt's name. No answer. Ruby kept barking, trying to guide him deeper into the apartment. Curtis followed, growing more anxious by the second. When he reached the kitchen, he glanced toward the living room, and that's when he saw something that would haunt him forever. Egypt's feet were visible from behind a piece of furniture. As Curtis moved closer, his heart racing, he saw her lying on the floor. She was already gone. Egypt was curled in the fetal position, her hands bound behind her back, her face resting on its left side. Blood covered her head. Curtis stood frozen in shock, his mind struggling to process the horror in front of him. He ran out of the apartment, heart pounding, and sprinted back to his truck. With trembling hands, he dialed 911. When trying to keep it together to tell the police what's going on, and then switching back to this horrifying realization that his girlfriend is dead, he goes back and forth between that reality and trying to really keep it together so they can find out who did this. I feel for anyone who has to witness something like this, especially when it concerns someone that you love. Now, I mentioned that the Van Buren Township governed this area of Michigan, so I'm going to refer to them as the VBTPD, or Van Buren Township Police Department. They had officers rush to Egypt's house. Curtis didn't have to wait long. They were there in just a few minutes, after they got the right address, that is, because in the complete state of shock he was in, Curtis gave them the wrong street. He said Bemis, which is kinda like a street over. This was Huron Street. Once all that was cleared up, it did not take long for officers to get there. When they arrived on the scene, the first thing that they noticed, which they were also told by Curtis, was that the door was open. But it wasn't considered broken into technically. There was no forced entry into the duplex. They were taking what Curtis said into consideration as evidence. that the door had been left open by the perpetrator or someone else. But the fact was, nothing was broken and nothing seemed to even be stolen from what it looked like, so they didn't consider this a robbery. It was something else. What it was to Curtis was the end of his future with the woman he loved. Everything they planned was never going to happen. Egypt had one gunshot wound to her head right near her ear. Officers also noticed there was a couch cushion lying next to her, which had been put over her head before she was shot. There was a hole in it, presumably to muffle the sound of the gunshot. That's when Curtis mentioned the neighbors, Stephen and Megan, who lived in an adjoining unit in the duplex, but they were not home. The only witness to this crime seemed to have been little Ruby, the poor little dog, just helpless and waiting for someone to come find her mommy. One of the most unusual things about this crime scene was the way that Egypt was bound. I told you that her hands were behind her back, but it was what they were tied with that left everyone questioning who would do something like this. She was tied up with Christmas lights on a summer night in the middle of June. The next thing the police had to do was notify Egypt's family, her big family. Word traveled from one family member to the next until Egypt's father, Chuck Covington, got the news from Egypt's sister, Beth. It was unbelievable, devastating to get a message like that about your daughter. Beth was hysterically crying, and Chuck could hardly understand what she was saying, but he ended up being able to make out that she was saying Egypt had been killed. Now Chuck had to relay this message to the rest of his family. He had to make those phone calls, one after the other, to every single person he knew who loved Egypt. One of those people was Egypt's brother, Dwayne Turner. I mentioned Dwayne earlier. He was Egypt's older brother who taught her all about bartending. He was a decade older than she was, and they shared the same mother, Tina. About 45 minutes away across town, Dwayne was having a reunion with his three closest friends, Matt, Leah, and Aaron, at a place called Social Kitchen, a restaurant and bar in Birmingham, Michigan. They had not seen each other in years, and everything was so perfect that night. The weather was great, the crowd was really happening, and they were enjoying the food and the drinks, catching up. But it was just before midnight when Dwayne saw Egypt's father calling him. When he looked down and saw who it was, he was a bit confused. He wasn't used to getting calls from Chuck, but of course, he answered right away. At first, he couldn't even understand the words coming out of Chuck's mouth. He was just sobbing. Dwayne was trying to understand what he was saying over the music, the sound of the crowd, all the noise in the background. He was finally able to make out something like, "We lost Egypt. She was killed. She's gone." That's shocking. You're enjoying this night with your friends. Nothing like this is in your head. You never imagined you would get a call like that. Dwayne fell to his knees right there in front of everyone, shamelessly crying on the floor. But who wouldn't? This is his little sister. At least he was surrounded by people who loved and cared about him, who were there to console him. They got him up and let him out the back door. They stayed with him for the rest of the night, making sure he was okay and comforting him in the best way they knew how. Egypt was Dwayne's mini-me. He is the person she would come to for advice, especially on bartending. He wrote a poem about her. After reading it, the qualities about Egypt that I wanted to share were these. She was the black sheep of her family. She had a smile that would brighten the room. She loved to cook. She was a very generous person. She would give you the shirt right off her back. She was definitely the life of the party, and music was just part of her. It was her passion. Everybody loved Egypt. So who would have done this? That is what everyone was thinking when they heard the news. They were asking why. She had the kindest heart, she was just a good person, and justice had to be done. Then there was Tina. She also received a call from Egypt's father, her ex-husband, Chuck. I don't think she would have been expecting to hear from him because they were not exactly on the best terms, even after all of these years. As much as Egypt loved both her mother and her father so very much, they just did not see eye to eye. I can tell you, from what I know through all the research I've done, they are two very different people. I know opposites do attract, but not always, and not forever. These two definitely butted heads. But in that moment, there was solidarity. In that moment, They came together because in that moment, Tina found out that her baby girl had been murdered. When she heard those words, all she could remember was screaming and crying and saying, "Not my baby." Tina couldn't imagine how this could happen. She just couldn't bear to think about the fact that she couldn't be there for her baby. As we get older, we are still our parents' babies. We're the adult children, but no matter how old my mom gets, she's still going to consider me her baby, and I'm going to consider my daughter my baby. Tina just felt like she couldn't protect Egypt. She just wanted to know why. Why her? It didn't take long for the news of Egypt's murder to spread across the peaceful lake town. They did not have homicides in this area very often, one, maybe two, if that, in a year. So residents were definitely not used to seeing a headline that said, "Woman found murdered in her home." Even though all these local news stations, newspapers, and everything were picking up this story, not much was actually being said. In good part because the authorities didn't want to leak too much to the media, especially because they had no leads. There were also some facts that Curtis did not want the public to know about, especially Egypt's family. And before you think it's something suspicious, this is more of a courtesy. It was the Christmas lights. He didn't want the family to find out that Egypt's hands were bound in a string of Christmas lights. He didn't want them to have that association every time they saw a beautiful Christmas tree. They would look at those lights and imagine Egypt's murder, so he tried to keep that close to his vest. But of course, that was a detail that was going to come out because, sadly, it's one of those details that makes a story more interesting, more flagrant, more clickable. I hate saying that, but it is true. It was one of those peculiar things in this case that many people have differing opinions on, and don't worry, I will definitely go into some of that. But right now, police are doing their best to canvass this area and to look around the entire permit for clues. The hardest part for local residents to understand is how could this happen inside of Egypt's own home? To them, it meant that this could happen to anyone. She was at the right place at the wrong time. Police wanted to know if the neighbors, Steve and Megan, had heard anything the night before, so they tried to get in contact with them. But it turns out they hadn't been home because they were at a music festival, a rave. It's one that they apparently attend every year called the Electric Forest Music Festival, and it was on the west side of Michigan. Because this is a small town, I guess a lot of people knew Steve and Megan as well. They seemed to be the town suppliers of marijuana because everyone seemed to know that they were going to be gone that weekend since they always went to this festival. I was thinking maybe it's because they were working the festival, providing marijuana for the attendees. I'd never heard of it before, but it's held in a place called Rothbury, Michigan. It's an annual festival that goes on for 4 days, one weekend, with multi-genre music that focuses on electronic music. There you have it. When I mapped it from Belleville, it was a 3-hour drive and over 200 miles away. Needless to say, the cops didn't think that Steve and Megan had anything to do with this crime, nor would they have heard anything because they were not in town. Egypt's family was sad to hear that no one was there. Of course, they wouldn't have wanted anyone else to be hurt, but maybe they would have heard something, maybe they would have seen something, or maybe they could have done something. But that just wasn't the case. The fact that none of the doors had actually been pried open and there were no signs of robbery started to lead police to believe that Egypt probably knew her killer. She most likely let them inside. And I know you're going to know exactly who they want to speak to first. The man that found her, Curtis Meadows, her boyfriend. He basically let police know right away that he was not guilty of anything except for loving Egypt. He had nothing to do with this crime, nothing. He said from the beginning, "Look at anything you want. You want to question me? Do it. I'll tell you anything you want to know. I'm an open book." And he was completely cooperative from the minute he made that 911 call. He told them every detail he possibly could know. He even sat down and did a lie detector test right away, and they grilled him for hours. There were a lot of questions. Curtis was honest. He even said, "I wasn't the greatest boyfriend back in the day, but now their relationship was stronger than it had ever been." So the Van Buren Township Police Department started to rule Curtis out. However, he gave them a piece of information about another boyfriend, an ex-boyfriend, not a current boyfriend, of course, but a recent ex-boyfriend, someone that Egypt had dated between the times that she and Curtis were not together. And according to Beth Covington, Egypt's sister, there was only one guy that Egypt dated when she wasn't with Curtis, and his name was Kenny Mahalik. Egypt had started dating him during one of her and Curtis's breakups. The thing is, Egypt's mother, Tina, knew Kenny's family really well. That's actually how Egypt ended up meeting Kenny. Kenny was 10 years older than Egypt, and he was really good looking. That's what people said. He was a really good looking mechanic, and he was a ladies' man. A lot of women were interested in him because of his looks. Maybe not so much his personality. I mean, he was charming and funny, and he definitely caught Egypt's eye when they were at a family get-together. But there were some red flags too. We'll get to that in a moment. She pointed him out, and she told her mom that she was going to date him someday. She looked over there and said, "Well, you're never going to get him to marry you, so don't even get it in your head." Egypt's response was sort of like, "Well, I'll fix that." So at one point, when she and Curtis weren't together, she decided to go for it. Egypt and Kenny started to date. To me, from all of the Instagram posts that I saw, they had a pretty whirlwind type of relationship. She was in love, as far as I could see. She just couldn't stop posting pictures of him, talking about how funny he was. She would always be hashtagging things like, "my man," and how cute he was, and it looked like they had a lot of fun together. The Van Buren Township Police Department was interviewing a lot of friends and family, and they were starting to hear Kenny's name come up multiple times. Sometimes just because of the timeline and people wanting to know as much information as possible. But many people who knew Egypt would say, you might want to look into Kenny. It might have looked like they had something solid on the outside, but that's not the whole story. They explained that when they were dating, it's not who she really wanted to be with. It was kind of like he was Mr. Right Now. And if that was true, why did they date for so long? They were together for 3 years, and many of her friends, like her friend Nori, who was very close to her, explained that she wanted to break up with him, but she also wanted someone to be around. She craved that companionship. However, she also talked about wanting to cut him off time and time again. But remember, she was close to Kenny's family, so she didn't want to do it in a way that would cause a lot of drama or attention. They were still friends, so she would even go to family gatherings, and they still called and texted back and forth until she got with Curtis. A lot of her friends did not have very nice things to say about Kenny. A lot of them said that their relationship was volatile, that Kenny would take her phone, go through all of her text messages, get all of her friends' numbers, and even go sleep with them to get revenge or to belittle her or just make her feel like crap. Those aren't actually true friends, girls, just so you know. These kinds of things made Egypt feel worthless. So Beth, Egypt's sister, said that when they were on this cruise vacation to the Caribbean that they took not too long ago, she confided in Beth about how bad her relationship with Kenny really was. Egypt told her that Kenny would punch holes in the wall and that they would have these screaming matches. They'd been at a wedding, and according to her, something bad happened. They got into a disagreement, and he ends up throwing her up against a wall. Well, this isn't looking good for Kenny, but they needed to confirm all this. So they go back to Curtis, and they ask him about Kenny, and he mentions that he knows all about that physical altercation at the hotel. Egypt told him that when the wedding had concluded, there were people getting together at a hotel nearby. The way that Egypt explained it wasn't exactly that they were getting physical, that they were physically fighting. It was more like he grabbed her and pushed her up against the wall to kind of hold her back. Curtis went on to explain that the police were actually called, but no charges were filed because neither one of them wanted to file charges against each other. The thing is, Egypt's mother, Tina, had a different story. She said that it wasn't just about Kenny. Kenny wasn't the only one that was loud and had a big personality. Egypt would meet him in kind, so it was both of them. They both acted badly towards one another, and she knew how to push Kenny's buttons. Tina said that Egypt just knew which buttons to push, and she would push them. Tina called it passion. She also said it wasn't a big deal. Kenny wasn't even a confrontational type guy. He didn't even yell, according to Tina. Not only that, Tina said that the incident at the hotel, well, when the police came, they made a report. And in that report, it stated that both Egypt and Kenny were completely intoxicated, and neither one of them was cooperative. So it wasn't one-sided, it takes two to tango. But was this the truth, or was Egypt hiding something from her mother because her mother was close to Kenny's family? Well, this is just the beginning of the Great Divide. That's what I'm going to call it, the divide between Tina and Chuck. I already told you that they were not on very good terms. They were already divorced, he was remarried, and now they're divided on something else. Right away, Chuck and his wife Kristen, as well as friends like Nori and Egypt's sister Beth, and the list goes on. They believe Kenny should be looked at as the prime suspect. More and more stories were starting to unfold about how they thought he was controlling and manipulative. The wedding incident wasn't just something small. The staff of the hotel were the ones that called the police because these two were arguing so loudly. So, despite what Tina may say about Kenny, he was aggressive and explosive, according to friends, and that he had a very short temper. Egypt's friend Nori wasn't going to stop. She gave detectives all kinds of information, text messages from Egypt about how her and Kenny's relationship was going, how controlling he was and possessive, and worst of all, he wasn't happy about the breakup. He was jealous. He found out that Egypt was back with Curtis, and it did not go over well. With more and more information coming out about Kenny, it gives more and more reasons to convince Chuck that Kenny's responsible for killing his daughter. His mind was made up. It made sense. Kenny wanted Egypt, and he couldn't have her. She left him for someone she thought was better, Curtis, and that drove Kenny crazy. It's like if he couldn't have her, then nobody else could. But any time things like this were said, Tina would follow it up and say, no, he's just a gentle giant, he's not like that, and she would continue to profess Kenny's innocence and be on his side. That was a problem. It's almost like you had to choose a side. There was no middle ground. As a matter of fact, when it came to Egypt's memorial, Kenny wouldn't even come inside. He was out in the parking lot with his nephews, but his mom was inside, sitting next to Tina. Tina looked over and she asked Kenny's mom where he was, and she said, well, you know, he's afraid to come in here. Tina stepped outside, went up to him and said, get your butt in here and sit down. Then she sat right next to Kenny. Can you believe that? I mean, you could hear a pin drop. It was so silent. It was like crickets. What in the world is going on? Was Tina sitting next to her daughter's killer? That's what people were thinking, and the plot will thicken. You're going to hear a lot more about this, but to make things even more uncomfortable, Chuck gets up there and makes a speech. Let's just say, after hearing it, there would be no question who he thought the killer was. Kenny. This solidified it even more. You were either on Chuck's side or you were on Tina's side, but the real question was, who's on Egypt's side? The Van Buren police were supposed to be, but they didn't seem to be making much progress with the case. They were still interviewing all of Egypt's friends and family members, which turned out to be quite a task for such a small task force. Though the community is small, look how many people came out to that one singing competition a couple of years before Egypt's murder. Hundreds. Not to mention the hundreds, maybe thousands of patrons that would come through the various bars that she worked at over the years. Almost a decade's worth of people who knew Egypt, or at least knew of her, and they all wanted to provide information. It's as though the interviews never ended. There was always a new person trying to provide a tip. And you'd think that these tips would be welcomed. After all, aren't the police trying to solve Egypt's murder? You'd think so, but it seemed like no matter how many people they talked to, the police were still laser-focused on Kenny. However, some new information had finally been brought to the table, and it wasn't about Kenny. There were a lot of men that wanted Egypt's attention, and one of those men was apparently her former boss. Now the stories varied. Some people said Egypt was in a relationship with him at some point. They didn't know if it was just a physical relationship or something more. But he was married, so many people were kind of hush-hush about it. Others tried to give police as much information as they could, from what they had seen or heard during the time that this so-called relationship was materializing. What was said was that he took an interest in helping with her music career. So, right after she won the Country Idol contest, Egypt told her friend Leslie that her former boss at the time offered to take her all the way to Nashville for the next big tryout. Leslie didn't think this was a very good idea, but if you know Egypt by now, there's nothing that's going to stand in the way of Egypt's dream. So, she went on the trip anyway, but when she came back she confided in Leslie that it didn't go well. Apparently, he wanted more. He wanted, more from this little deal, taking her all the way there to make her dream come true, that kind of what's in it for me thing, and she wasn't having it. So they got into a big argument, and police wanted to understand what this guy wanted from Egypt, what type of person he was, how bad was this argument, would there be any reason to harm Egypt, or could someone else have a reason like a wife? Dwayne was actually familiar with this former boss. He knew him, and he definitely saw red flags. He said the guy had a temper. It did not take much to set him off. He was known to flip out on people. The investigators called him in. Meanwhile, the town is buzzing about whether this guy could be Egypt's killer. Sure enough, rumors started to swirl around, lots of gossip about how he was infatuated or obsessed with Egypt. Maybe he wanted revenge. Just because she didn't give him a chance while they were out in Nashville, could that have set him off? There were a lot of questions, but it turns out the police crossed him off their list pretty fast. The reason? He fully cooperated with them. He said he was never interested in a romantic relationship with her. He was married and loved his wife. His wife knew all about the trip he took with Egypt to Nashville. He was just trying to be a good friend and help out where he could. He liked Egypt and wanted her to succeed, that's all. Well, the police may have ruled him out, but not the court of public opinion. They hadn't. They wouldn't rule anyone out unless there was complete concrete proof of who did it. Everyone was a suspect, and without more leads coming in at all, the Van Buren Township Police Department just kept going right back to Kenny. They still hadn't made an arrest, though, and he wasn't even officially a suspect. Not even an official person of interest. They just kept pressing Curtis and other people close to Egypt to tell them anything they could about Kenny, especially anything that seemed off. That's when Curtis came forward with even more damning information. He told them that a month prior to her murder, it was early on a Sunday morning while Egypt was spending the night at Curtis's house. He looked out of his window from the third floor and saw Kenny in the parking lot. Kenny's truck was parked behind Egypt's car, and Kenny was outside looking into her windows. What the hell? That's creepy, and the police thought so too. The police wanted to know what Curtis did next, and he said, "I just watched Kenny get back into his truck and drive off." Curtis did explain that Egypt told him she confronted Kenny about it, and he explained it away, saying, "Oh, I was just on my way to work and I spotted your car. It was starting to rain and I saw that you had your sunroof open, so I don't know. I was going to close it. I don't know. It sounds suspicious. Something doesn't add up." Not only that, there was a theory that Curtis came up with. He said he thought Kenny had put a tracking device on Egypt's car, and that morning Curtis thought Kenny was most likely coming by to retrieve it. Yes, because this wasn't the first time Kenny knew exactly where Egypt was. That's right. He had shown up at the same places she was at a number of times, and it started to make Egypt feel uncomfortable. She even told her stepmom, Chris, about it. She explained that she really wanted to tell Kenny that she needed to be left alone, she needed space, but it was hard for her to do that. She said Kenny was like a lost puppy dog, and Chris responded with, "Well, you can't save every last puppy." Everyone really wanted Egypt to move on, and they were truly hoping that when she got back with Curtis, this would make it clear to Kenny that she was done. But it just didn't seem like he was getting the hint until the Belleville Strawberry Festival. It's a pretty big deal in Belleville, something that the town has been known for since 1977. That's when it started. It was a way for local farmers to celebrate their strawberry crops, but it's evolved quite a bit since then. It's got it all. A carnival, live music, animals, bingo, a parade, Clydesdale horses, strawberry treats, craft vendors, a karaoke tent, and lots of great food. As a southern girl, I like carnival food so much. I didn't see any corn, But look at this place. It happens every year on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday during Father's Day weekend. It really does seem like the perfect place for a little Father's Day fun with the kids. In 2017, it was on June 16th, 17th, and 18th. I get excited because this was something that got Egypt excited. I never want you to think I'm coming off insensitive and just happy while I'm explaining what happened in these cases. But this was a small town, and it was something that Egypt really looked forward to. It's a lot of fun. But even though it may have been a small town, it's actually estimated that every year the Belleville Strawberry Festival brought in over 200,000 people from southeastern Michigan and further. That was something important to note, considering Egypt was in attendance on Saturday, June 17th, just days before she was found dead. Kenny was there too, and so was Curtis. Curtis got there first and planned to meet up with Egypt. However, Egypt's plan was to meet with Kenny to let him know once and for all they were done, that she was serious about Curtis and they were moving in together. When Curtis arrived, he saw Kenny right away, so he made sure to stay away. According to him, he wasn't there to get involved. Once Egypt arrived, she went right over to Kenny, who was surrounded by a group of their friends. From what Curtis could see from afar, they were having a very intense conversation. He had no idea what kind of words were being exchanged, but from the body language alone, it said it all. Once Egypt was done, she started to walk toward Curtis, but Kenny didn't stay back, he was following her. So she turns around and gets in his face. Then they exchanged some heated words. They were very upset. She ends up running off, and then 5 days later, she's murdered. They had already interviewed Kenny from the beginning of this investigation. Just hours after Egypt's body was found, he was out at a bar. Then they found him, brought him back to the station, and kept him there for hours, grilling him with question after question. The most important one was, "Where were you on the night of June 22nd? He said they spent most of his evening out at bars with his friends, and then he went home and went to bed. It's not a great alibi. You've got your drunk friends, and then you were home alone. That's not the only reason Kenny was their number one person of interest. He failed the polygraph test. Yeah, and it was bad. The only thing they said he got right was his name and the date. After that, everyone thought Kenny was guilty. But polygraphs? Really, they're not admissible in court, so unless they found real concrete evidence, nothing more could be done. But it was even harder to do anything to Kenny because he retained an attorney. He seemed to be sick of having all the fingers pointed in his direction, and he claimed he was innocent. He wanted them to go look at someone else because her killer was still on the loose, and it wasn't him. I hope you are still here watching this because it's about to get crazy. I've never even done a case like this. Just wait. I'm telling you, just wait. Caught in the middle of all this was D. Wayne. He was Tina's son too. It's hard not to take your mother's side. He loves his sister, and he just wants the truth to come out. He didn't even want to pick sides, but he knew that his mother had always been taught that you do not go around accusing someone of something that could ruin their life unless you have proof. So, what actual proof did the Van Buren Township Police Department have? Sooner or later, Tina was being pegged as someone who was a traitor or betraying her own daughter, especially when Chuck's side found out Tina allowed Kenny to babysit little Ruby, the dog. Here's something else I want to just say as a caveat. Tina was desperate. At one point, she even went to an expert to try to see if the dog could somehow remember something, recognize the killer somehow. I know it sounds silly, but guys, I don't know if you've ever been in this situation. I know I have not. You're at your wit's end. You're going to go through any possible way to get more information. It turns out that this expert said yes. A dog can react differently to seeing somebody that you know had done something like this, but the only thing they would probably do is just back away from them. So there's no real science behind it, and there's no real data to use for these purposes. But I just wanted to let you know, that's how desperate her family really was. As far as the whole situation with Ruby and Kenny, Tina thought it was absurd. Ruby knew Kenny, Ruby loved Kenny, and Kenny loved Ruby. Tina insisted that Egypt would always let Kenny babysit Ruby anytime he wanted, and Tina just couldn't say no. Kenny had lost Egypt. She didn't want him to lose Ruby too. No one was thinking about that. As far as Tina was concerned, regardless of the allegations, Tina saw things differently. Maybe she was biased because she was close to Kenny and his family. The real reason she didn't think differently after Kenny was officially named the person of interest, which was 9 months following the murder, was because she thought the Van Buren Township Police Department was just a small department that didn't have the resources to get it right. They had to pin the murder on someone. So why not the ex-boyfriend who had a public fight with her just days before her murder? Tina thought this was a job for a much bigger department, like the Michigan State Police. Egypt worked in an industry that exposed her to hundreds of people. Anyone could have been watching her. It doesn't have to be someone she knew, it could be anyone. And Tina thought they needed to expand their search. Tina knew Egypt did not feel safe where she was living. She was concerned that this was not anyone close to Egypt. D. Wayne was leaning more toward his mother's side. 7 months following Egypt's death, his mind had shifted towards something else. Or I should say someone else. I'm not talking about another suspect. I'm talking about a new love interest. Because during all this sadness, D. Wayne met a woman named Lindsay. They were both playing sand volleyball with friends and ended up meeting each other. There's a reason why I'm telling you this. I'm not going on a tangent about D. Wayne and his love life. Hear me out. It was January 2018, and D. Wayne may have been happy that someone like Lindsay came into his life, but he wasn't going to share the truth about his life with her, the truth about Egypt. It was too much, too soon, so he stayed quiet. Besides, Lindsay lived 30 miles away in another town. She wasn't part of their close-knit community. She was a mom of 3 and a kindergarten teacher. She had enough to worry about, and her and D. Wayne were not even officially a couple. They were just casually going out, having a good time together. However, after hanging out for a few weeks, Lindsay had questions. One question in particular. She wanted to know who the gorgeous girl was that D. Wayne had on his phone lock screen. It could have been jealousy. It could have been pure curiosity, but she was intrigued. She just wondered who that could be, and it wasn't until one night, after they had a few drinks, that Lindsay got up the nerve to ask. She was not ready for the answer. Not at all. She wasn't expecting to hear that D. Wayne had a younger sister who had been murdered and that they hadn't caught the killer. She wasn't even expecting him to say it was his sister. She thought, wow, that's interesting. Maybe even kind of weird. But then, when D. Wayne told her why his sister's picture was there and what had happened and that his little sister had been murdered, she was in complete shock. I do not know how I would react, but Lindsay had a lot of questions. Maybe some of you wouldn't think this, but one of Lindsay's first thoughts was, oh my God, what if D. Wayne had something to do with it? I mean, it is a logical question to have. You hear that someone's close to someone who was murdered and that it's unsolved. She was like, who knows? And she was not comfortable getting closer to D. Wayne or letting him meet her kids if there was any suspicion that he was involved. She knew nothing about this case, where it stood, and she wanted to learn more. There were so many questions going through her mind. Who did this? Why did they do it? How did the police not know? And then she asked D. Wayne, did you do it? Where were you on the night that this happened? When she asked him who he thought did it, he said that the most likely suspect was Kenny. But then she pressed him as to why he felt that way, and he couldn't explain why. He even admitted to Lindsay that he had never been interviewed. Wow. Almost a year later, and a person in Egypt's family has not been interviewed yet? The Van Buren Township Police Department kept telling their community members they were diligently doing their jobs. When Lindsay found out everything that happened, she couldn't sleep. Maybe it was that motherly love and instinct. She'd been thinking about the fact that this was the seemingly unsolved case about someone's daughter, someone's sister, someone's loved one, and that kept her up all night. She just kept thinking, how can I help? How could they get to the bottom of this? She was determined. There was just this light inside of her that was burning for answers. She was thinking about the fact that she has a brother, she has 2 little boys, and how the community and the police were already suspecting Egypt's boyfriend. So in her mind, she thought, what would happen if this was someone in my family? If this was a man in my family, what if they were being accused of murder, but there was no way for them to prove it? How would I feel? What would I want? I really like how Lindsay looks at things. She looks at things from both sides. She could put herself in Kenny's family's shoes too. There's always many sides to a story. But one thing's for sure, Lindsay wouldn't stand around without asking questions and doing something to solve this case for the sake of everyone involved. Her boyfriend, her boyfriend's family, Egypt's family, and anyone who knew and loved her. So this was the moment that Lindsay became Egypt's warrior. That was the mindset she had. She wasn't going to stop until she found the answers. And at this point, she wasn't even in love with D. Wayne. She really liked him, but she just had this overwhelming feeling that this was something she had to do. She's not an investigator. This is not her job to solve crimes. But after talking to D. Wayne, it didn't seem like anyone was. The first thing she was thinking was that they should start with the most likely suspect, the one whom police believed did it, Kenny. She heard that the Van Buren Township Police Department just needed a little more evidence. That was all they needed, one more thing. And that was what was stopping them from making an arrest. Well, then how could they provide them with that one thing so that they could prove it? And more importantly, if it really wasn't Kenny that did this, how could they go about finding out who really did? Well, Lindsay and D. Wayne were breathing new life into Egypt's case. Lindsay was going 100 miles per hour. She gathered all the info that they already knew, and she started to conduct her own interviews. She was making phone calls and pretty much gathering their own evidence, just like detectives. With modern technology, guys, everyone and anyone can investigate crimes. There have been a number of cases solved in just the past few years because of social media and people coming together on places like Facebook to gather information. Lindsay was doing all of that. Facebook pages, hashtags, t-shirts, flyers, anything and everything that she could do to bring and keep awareness on Egypt's case. Then, around 9 months after her death, in March of 2018, the Van Buren Township Police Department finally officially announced their person of interest. No surprise, Kenny. Around the same time, Kenny's lawyer put out a public statement, and I want to read it to you. Van Buren Township Police noted in their recent press release that my client was not currently in communication with the department, which is a bit misleading. He, Kenny, fully cooperated with police. Kenny was interviewed with the Van Buren Township Police on multiple occasions. He provided a full timeline of his whereabouts during the days surrounding Miss Covington's death and has remained in town for the entire 10 months of this investigation. Since being retained to represent him in late June 2017, his attorney has reached out and spoken with the police on a dozen occasions, asking for updates and seeing if they needed anything else from them. Kenny continues to maintain his absolute innocence regarding anything to do with Miss Covington's death, just as he has from the very beginning. At this point, people were even donating large billboards to be placed around town to keep Egypt's case in the hearts and minds of the residents, hoping that someone with information would come forward. They needed a tip, a lead, something to go on, or something to put Kenny behind bars. Investigators even suggested that the donors place the billboards on Kenny's street, hoping this would pressure him to confess or encourage someone close to him to come forward. However, nothing transpired. If anything, it probably just angered him. Another person who was upset about the whole situation was Chuck Covington. When Chuck saw the billboards, the thought that crossed his mind was that he hoped the killer would pass by one of them and take drastic action. While I can't condone such feelings, I understand that emotions run high in situations like these, especially for those who loved Egypt. For Chuck and others, the billboards were a sad reminder that she was gone. Curtis would drive by one and make a promise to Egypt each time, saying, "I've got you," as he vowed to find out who did this to her. Remember how Tina doesn't trust the Van Buren Township Police Department to do their job? She suggested they hire a private detective, someone with a lot of experience who could come in and look for things they might be missing. A friend named Debbie set up a fundraiser, and they ended up hiring a man named Dave. I won't go into all his credentials, but he's worked in law enforcement for over 20 years, with experience ranging from homicide to covert operations and undercover work. This guy is legit. I want to emphasize that Dave was retained to work for Egypt, not Tina. He was hired by a fundraiser from the community, and this distinction would become another huge divide in the family since Tina was essentially navigating this situation. On August 22, 2018, 14 months after the murder, the private investigator Dave and Tina set up a meeting with the Van Buren Township Police Department and their chief of police, Jason Wright. Wait until you hear the comments made by these law enforcement officials. The chief didn't hesitate to tell Tina that they had already taken the investigation as far as they could, and that no one besides the victim's family wanted to solve this case as much as they did. The only way to solve it, they said, was if someone came forward. That sounds like quite a cop-out, like saying they hope it'll just get solved on its own. They admitted to having their suspicions but couldn't connect anyone, stating they usually solve a murder in a week, but this case was different from day one. Tina wanted to know what they found on Egypt's phone. She asked if they ever got it unlocked, and I'm sitting here thinking, wait a minute, are you talking about Face ID? What kind of lock are we dealing with? Apparently, no one in her life knew how to unlock it because the police officers were completely locked out of her phone. What is this, the Stone Age? 14 months into the investigation, and they couldn't access her phone, not even with a gray box. Tina asked if they were aware of what a gray box was, and they didn't even know. This device was developed after a lawsuit regarding Apple locking iPhones, preventing even law enforcement from accessing them. A gray box allows the contents of an iPhone to be dumped without unlocking it. Chief Wright said he had never heard of a gray box. Well, if you only handle 2 homicides a year or so, you probably don't have access to that technology. Then Dave asked if they had done any process of life analysis, and Chief Wright didn't know what that was either. This process analyzes a victim's life and the impact of all the people and environments around them that could have contributed to their demise. The police claimed they were looking for patterns, but weren't sure which ones. All of this is very concerning, but now there's something even more alarming. They essentially told Tina that they weren't going to have the same relationship with her as they did with Chuck, Egypt's father. Why not? These are both family members of the victim, her mom and dad. They explained that it was because Chuck and Tina weren't on good terms, and that she hadn't been thrilled with how the detectives were handling the case. Basically, they were saying they wouldn't work with her private detective because he was working for her. Isn't everyone working for Egypt? How childish is this? Started to make me think, is this what happens behind the scenes of murder cases? This back end that we don't see over niceties like, oh well, he's nicer to us than you are, and you don't like us, you don't think we're doing the job, so we're not going to even talk to your private investigator. Very odd. In this case, it's very odd. If the victim's parents don't care for the detectives, does this mean it changes the methods they use to solve the case or block others from helping? What's the issue? Well, the issue was that Tina didn't agree that Kenny was the killer. Everyone else pointed their fingers at him from day one. Egypt's father, the stepmom, the authorities, they were all on the same side, pushing that narrative. Is it not okay to question things and say, wait, let's not focus all of our attention on this one person? They can't even arrest him, still waiting over a year for one last piece of information. That's what they keep telling people. Why are they just sitting on their butts, waiting? So there's Tina. She's thinking anyone that goes against their narrative isn't going to get good treatment, even the mother of a victim. I don't know. Are cops always this way? Let me know if you know, because this is the very first case where I'm getting to see this type of information, and I have Lindsay to thank for all of this. I listened closely to everything she put together through her own research, and it was very valuable. And wait until you hear what happens next. After the meeting, the director of public safety, a guy named Greg Lorraine, says to Tina that there's a rumor going around that Egypt got around. Excuse me? Egypt got around? What the f? He can't be serious. This was a clear sign that they did not care about Egypt. Look at the way they painted her. You can use your imagination on what they were thinking in regard to her getting around. And I can't even begin to imagine how frustrating it would be to have no power over solving your own daughter's case when they have all the evidence and they won't provide it to you or your detective. It's like they're holding her daughter captive even after death. It's like a sick purgatory. These are the people that have been entrusted to solve Tina's daughter's murder. Lindsay says, F it, I'm gonna go ask Kenny some questions myself, because this girl's a badass. And I've never done this before, but Lindsay, if you're watching this, and I know a lot of family members watch my videos, if they see their loved one's name pop up, reach out to me. Honestly, I would love to have a conversation with you. I would love to collaborate on something with you, Lindsay, because none of the viewers know this yet, but Lindsay even started a podcast about true crime. I'm going to talk about that later, but let's get back to 2018. Lindsay and Dwayne decided to simply call Kenny up and ask him, "Did you do it? Did you kill Dwayne's sister?" And Kenny answers, talks to both of them, and says, "No, I didn't kill your sister." Of course, Lindsay asks, "Well, do you have proof of that? Do you have proof that you didn't kill her?" And surprisingly, Kenny says yes, he does. He literally agrees to sit down with them to talk so that he could tell them his side of the story. Well, here's the thing. Even though Lindsay and Dwayne are fully capable of talking to Kenny and jotting down notes, it was actually pretty important that this interview was done correctly. Lindsay and Dwayne got their foot in the door with Kenny, but now was the time for someone professional to sit down and hear him out. That's what Dave did, and Kenny agreed. So, on June 14th, 2018, Kenny sat down with Dave and agreed to answer questions about Egypt. Kenny explained that the relationship was always pretty complicated from the beginning, but he said from the time they broke up, they were sleeping together on and off for at least the next 8 months. However, they were not together and not in a relationship. Their relationship was off by the time he heard that she was back with Curtis and moving in with him. That was a great segue into the Strawberry Festival and the fight that ensued. So Dave asked him about that too. He said he didn't show up with friends, he knew a lot of people in town, and he knew he'd probably run into people that he could just hang out with. Well, one of those people he says he ended up running into was actually Curtis, and that's not exactly the story that we heard. But Kenny said he overheard Curtis talking about Egypt moving in with him. He didn't remember who Curtis was talking to, but he heard it. Then, about 30 minutes later, Egypt comes up to them and wants to know, kind of like, "What are you doing here? Why are you with Curtis? Why are you guys in the same vicinity?" She wants nothing to do with it, and Kenny tries to say, "Hey, I want to talk to you about Curtis." She wasn't having it, so she walks away with Curtis. Kenny went over there and said, "Look, we're going to talk about this, so hang on. Because I personally see how this can look aggressive." He's coming towards the couple. He's obviously annoyed by what he heard. I don't know if Curtis or whoever said it wanted him to hear it because it was in earshot, but either way, it does seem like he wants to instigate something. I could be wrong. Nevertheless, he said that Egypt just laughed at him, and Dave said to Kenny, "Well, were you mad that she was moving in with Curtis?" And he said, "No, I wasn't mad, I was just surprised because she didn't tell me about that." So, Dave asked if they still talked, and Kenny said, "Yes, we are like family." He added that his sisters still went to movies with her, and he goes on to explain and admit that, yes, they exchanged some hot words, but it wasn't something that would ever lead to murder. And it didn't lead to murder, it was just like, "Why the f*** didn't you tell me about it?" But she wasn't having it, and she was just like, and left. Kenny even admits he did punch not one but 2 holes in a wall, but he repaired them both. Dave pressed Kenny about the timeline. Thursday, he said he was at the lake with his friends during the day, then he went out to the bars. He even said where he went. He went to Bayou Egan's, Lake View, one after the other. He stayed out till about 10 o'clock and then went home, ate some burritos, put on some Netflix or Hulu on his phone, and that's it. He also told Dave that he already told all of this to the Van Buren Township Police Department and asked them to please verify it to clear him. Kenny explained that he used his phone the whole time. It would show up, it would show his GPS, his whereabouts, what he was watching, when he was watching the shows, and he told the police, "Go check it." Get this. He even gave them his phone and his passcode. And then he told them that he had OnStar on his truck, and he wanted the Van Buren Township Police to check that out too, so they could confirm his alibi and focus on someone else. But Kenny explained that they had their sights set on making him the murderer. And that was that. As a matter of fact, the first night they interviewed him, they straight up looked at him and said, "You look guilty." He said, "Well, whatever, just tell me what you need to know because I am not guilty." But then he failed the polygraph. That's when they started to really put pressure on him. They were berating him, they were calling him a liar, and that's when they threatened to put him in jail for life. That is why he got an attorney. When Dave was done with the interview, he gave the tape over to Lindsay and Dwayne. This was exactly what Lindsay wanted, answers. Now that they heard Kenny's version in his own voice, which was pretty calm by the way, and he sounded that way through the whole thing, Lindsay and Dwayne began to change their minds, or at least they began to lean towards someone else being responsible besides Kenny. They thought it was a pretty good alibi because it can be verified. All police had to do was pull things like bank records, phone records, and video cameras at gas stations. There are gas stations lining roads to those bars, and if they had Kenny's phone, what did they find in it? Why wasn't more being done? What was the OnStar all about? Did that evidence ever get looked at? Lindsay and Dwayne were excited. They felt like they were getting somewhere. Now they needed to go even further. They felt like they wanted to share their findings with the rest of the family, Chuck's side, and some of Egypt's close friends, because they thought it was important to come together for Egypt with everything they knew. Plus, Lindsay wanted to hear what Chuck and Kristen had to say because Lindsay kept hearing, "If you only knew what Chuck and Chris knew about Kenny, then you'd see why he's guilty, no doubt. So show them." That was their train of thought. Good, you have proof, put it on the table. But when Lindsay sent out invitations, it was crickets. No one wanted to talk. Some of them declined right away with no real reasons, and Lindsay started to think, maybe it's me, maybe it's her. So you know what she said? "Let me stay back, let this be more of a family affair." So she told Dwayne, "Listen, let it be only your family," and people still declined. The only few that agreed were Chuck, Chris, and a close friend of Egypt's that was not named during my research. It's not important. What's important to note is that Lindsay knew this wasn't going to be an easy conversation. She had already been told how thick-headed and dead-set Chuck was on Kenny being the murderer, but she felt like she owed it to Egypt to try. And by the way, word had probably already gotten to Chuck because he was kind of buddy-buddy with the Van Buren Township Police Department, and they were not happy that Dave was conducting interviews and stepping on their toes. Really, though, because isn't it in everyone's best interest to solve this case and have the right person behind bars? It's not a competition or a pissing contest, and it's someone's life. I was getting heated. All of this was getting me heated when I was reading it and listening to things. Chuck had been very vocal in public about Kenny. He had spoken to media outlets, he had been on shows, just making accusations and stating that the only one that had access to her apartment to carry out this crime was Kenny. And technically, that's incorrect. Ever being 100% accurate, Curtis did too, and so did her neighbors for that matter. But Curtis could do no wrong in their eyes. They loved Curtis. So it cuts both ways. They were okay with one of her boyfriends but not the other, and both had access to her. All that mattered were facts. And that is what Lindsay and Dwayne wanted to offer to Chuck. So finally, a dinner date was set with Egypt's dad, Chuck, stepmom Chris, and a close friend. Here's your text with added punctuation for clarity and coherence. They agreed to host a dinner at the Covington household. Lindsay brought a nice bottle of wine over, and she was welcomed inside their home. Before this night, they all got along pretty well. They had dinners together, and Lindsay brought her father out to a Detroit Tigers game with all of them to celebrate a beer that was created in Egypt's honor. We'll talk about that later because I think it's so super special, but all they wanted to do was sit down with everyone, eye to eye, and share info. It was like, convince me. Their intention wasn't to say they knew for sure that Kenny didn't kill her, but they didn't know for a fact that he did right away. Egypt's friend arrives, and she's, according to Lindsay, high, and she continues to smoke throughout the night, which made Lindsay feel like they weren't going to be taken seriously. Then another sore subject comes up, and it was Chuck who brought it up. Tina. Yes, and I don't know how deep this hatred or this feud goes between Tina and her ex, but it was a rule at the dinner table. Tina should not be discussed. So why are you bringing her up? The friend had actually publicly talked crap about Tina on Facebook. The only reason I'm mentioning this is because remember that this is Dwayne's mother. It's Egypt and Dwayne's mother that they're talking about. It's disrespectful. You can dislike someone, but that is still someone's mother. If you talked about my mother, my sisters, my daughter, anyone I love, it's gonna set me off. It was probably hard for Dwayne to hold his tongue. So before they could even get to the topic of Kenny, there was already tension surrounding Tina. Why? Because Chuck did not like that this guy Dave was sticking his nose into everyone's business. Why? Well, Chris pipes up and she says, I don't like Dave because he sends me inappropriate text messages. Well, that was news to Lindsay, and it was also quite concerning. Clearly, they don't want some man that they're working with to be inappropriate. So by the way, Lindsay asked to see the text or for information, and Chris was just like, I don't want to get into it right now. Well, to flash forward and come back, Lindsay does end up checking this out, and she goes through all of the text message exchanges between Chris and Dave, and there's nothing inappropriate. Yeah, so what's the story? Let's get back to what transpired this fall night in October of 2018. As Lindsay is still trying to understand the issue that they have with Dave, Chuck butts in and sternly tells Lindsay to basically shut up. He may have said it in a nicer way, he may have just, hushed her. But nonetheless, she was pretty embarrassed. He said that she was talking too much and it was his turn to talk, so she just shut up right then and there. Chuck gives his reasoning as to why they don't trust Dave, and wait until you hear this. Here's a name we haven't heard in a while, but I think it's a very important person in this case in many ways. Steve. Remember Steve? He's the neighbor, the guy that lives in the adjoining apartment on the other side of the duplex, the couple that sells weed and puppies. Well, Steve told Chuck, and by the way, why do they talk? What connection would they have? Why would Steve offer up information like this to Chuck? Or was he getting it through the good old boys at the Van Buren Township Police Department? We'll talk about why there are some ties that exist between Chuck and the township. But Steve told Chuck that Dave actually tried to break into his apartment. Lindsay's stunned. She's like, couldn't Steve be lying? And Lindsay went on to say they tried to reach out to Steve to speak to him, but he declined. If Steve didn't have anything to hide, why was it such an issue that a detective wanted to speak to him? And that's when the friend chimes in and says, well, he'll never talk to you. And Lindsay was shocked. She's sitting there thinking, what the heck? Are all of a sudden you guys all of Steve's personal secretaries? Because Kristen's also adding fuel to the fire, saying that Dave called Child Protective Services on Steve and Megan to get their child removed. Lindsay knew damn well that that was not true. Actually, he didn't, nor did Dwayne, nor did Tina or Lindsay. On the contrary, the Township PD already had issues with Steve's place. They were inside themselves, and it's true, Dave had been asked about what Stephen and Megan's place looked like. He did not break in, he had been over there. It was after that visit that Steve took issue with him. The Township police actually called Dave and said, what did you see inside? They also asked Dwayne and Lindsay what they saw, but they had never been in the unit. So it was actually the Township doing their own research into Steve, not Dave. We'll find out more about that unit later on, but at this point, dinner is not going well. No one is even eating. Lindsay doesn't understand why this is even a big deal. If you're a parent and you have nothing to hide, let them come. She's a mom. If someone is harming a child or living in conditions that aren't healthy, then they should be held accountable. If not, Let the checks begin for the well-being of the children. Nothing Lindsay says seems to be getting through to anyone, except, of course, her other half, Dwayne, who knows Chuck very well. He spent many years growing up around this man and he keeps quiet, which is probably wise. Things did not get better, and they tell Lindsay why they don't like Tina. Because she hangs out with a person of interest. Lindsay probably shouldn't have said anything, but she chimed in. Well, you do too with Curtis. This set Chuck off, and it was already going to happen. I feel like no matter what was said, it would happen. He set his phone timer for 30 seconds and told Lindsay she could talk for that long. That's it. Well, Lindsay does not let men speak to her that way. Nope. She was there putting all this effort into helping solve his daughter's murder. She did not feel respected, and she showed it. She caused a little bit of a scene, ending with her saying something to the effect of, "You know what? You never even knew Egypt. You never even met her, and you're gonna come in here and challenge her family." It wasn't okay. Well, she leaves, gets into her car, and has a little cry. She definitely felt defeated. If it were me, I'm really sensitive, I would have been bawling my eyes out. I don't think I'm anywhere near as strong as Lindsay. Even though she was upset, she understood it. She was the new girl dating Egypt's brother. Who was she to say anything to tell them that Egypt's family was wrong? So she decides it's time for her to back off, to stop doing this. She realized it probably wasn't her place to do so, but Dwayne wasn't going to let that happen. He just kept saying, "Please don't stop. Don't allow this to stop our fight for my sister." That's what he said. But she did not want to tear this family apart even more. She felt at this point she was probably doing more harm than good. However, she would hear Dwayne out, and after they had several discussions about everything, Lindsay decided that she was going to continue. For Dwayne, for Egypt. And I'm going to say I am so thankful that she did. Next on her list was meeting with the detectives from the Van Buren Township Police Department herself. Spoiler alert, that did not go so well either. It was November 19, 2018 to 515 days since Egypt had been murdered, and Lindsay and Dwayne asked the Township Police Department for an update. They wanted a sit-down, an explanation, and to know the progress of the case. They had never sat down with Dwayne before. They still hadn't even reached out to him for an interview. You'd think, considering he's the brother of the woman you're trying to fight for, that they would have compassion. No, they were not warmly welcomed. The detectives did not show them empathy. And this was recorded. Yes, it was recorded. I don't know if this was recorded by Lindsay because at the time, Michigan was what's referred to as a one-party consent state. This means that it's not illegal to record a private conversation if the person recording is a party to that conversation, even without the consent of the other party. But it might have been gathered through the Freedom of Information Act. I'm not sure. All they wanted was an update. That should have been so easy. It's not that much to ask for. I listened to this whole recording and damn, were these men defensive. It was bad. There were 4 men, Director Lorraine, Lieutenant Bass, Detective McCarthy, and the Chief of Police, Jason Wright. The funny thing is they wanted information from Lindsay. That's the first thing they asked. They're like, so, any new tips? What you got for me? Isn't that their job? After Lindsay tried to get over the fact that these men didn't even give their condolences or say they were sorry for their loss, they just acted like this was just another number on their list to check off. She explained that they were there because they wanted information on the suspects. They wanted evidence and progress in the case. And their answer was, "We're at where we're at." That's what they said. We're at where we're at. Seriously? This was blowing Lindsay's mind. She teaches kindergartners, and I'm sure they would have more to say than these supposedly professional officers. I can't tell you every single thing that was said. I will link the interview below, and I encourage you to go check it out after all this, but I will highlight some of the most important points. It seemed like they thought it could only be 2 people, Curtis or Kenny. That's it. It was either one or the other, but Kenny was the one they labeled as the person of interest. So when she pressed them, and she's a badass about why they think Kenny did it, they actually said it was because he didn't give them good answers. He's got a lawyer, and he stopped talking to them, and everybody else gave good answers that made sense and cooperated. That's what you call some expert detective work right there. Another issue the men had was with the bar crowd, as they referred to it. They said that the bar crowd was making it hard on them, that the bar crowd was ridiculous. Lindsay wasn't following. She was like, "What do you mean, the bar crowd?" What they meant was, basically, they didn't like Egypt's friends, who she hung around with, and what they did for a living, because it made it harder for them to do their job. They explained there was this close-knit town where everybody knows everyone, and they would talk, they would go wishy-washy, and then there were tips that would turn out to be nonsense. That's an investigation, that's what you have to do. They even said that Kenny's family came forward with tips, and it made them go on a wild goose chase. Well, okay, maybe they're just trying to bring up tips that would help, just like everyone else. When Lindsay asked about the neighbors and their whereabouts, she got a really weird answer. The neighbors were allegedly out of town at a music festival. Remember this? But then she says to the detectives, "Wait, did you check their phones, their GPS? Can I see that information?" And they were like, "Well, no, we didn't need to do that." She's stunned. She's like, "You're taking their word for it? What kind of investigation is this?" It seemed really messed up, like the whole investigation had been botched. All this time had gone by, and it seemed like a big waste of time and taxpayers' money. The answers from the detectives were not to worry about the neighbors because they were just low-level potheads selling weed and ugly dogs that all over their place to make a buck here and there. By the way, they even said there was no furniture in the unit, only weed and dog. So does that sound like a good place for a child to live? I'm not trying to be judgmental. I'm telling you, according to everything you've heard, maybe that's why CPS was called. Maybe it wasn't Dave, but remember, Chuck and Chris were sticking up for Steve. There were other weird parts of the interview where they were saying things like, "You know, Egypt was the type that would fight back if she were attacked." I didn't understand what that had to do with anything, and Lindsay chimed in, arguing that she did not feel comfortable with them pegging Egypt a certain way, as doing one thing or another. We don't know who she was faced with or what, so we can't assume anything. It doesn't matter how tough she might have been. If you're put in a certain situation, even the strongest person could cower. During this interview, Lindsay asked if the case could be turned over to the Michigan State Police, and you could immediately tell that it rubbed them the wrong way. Totally. Of course, it did. The detectives argued that it was their case and that the Michigan State Police didn't have any more resources than they did. Really? Then they went on to brag about 8 FBI profilers that had worked on Egypt's case, and all of them pointed to Kenny. When Lindsay wanted the names of the profilers, they wouldn't provide them. Again, no proof. One officer said Curtis may have been an entup to Egypt in the past, but that was many, many years ago, and they were giving their relationship another shot. He went through messages, and they were in love. They were moving in together. So why would he kill his girlfriend? Oh, I don't know. But why wouldn't he? It was just a back and forth again and again. She kept pressing him about why the Michigan State Police were not involved. It seemed like a cockfight. It just seemed like the township did not want to give up their case. They said that they couldn't do a better job. Lindsay asked, "Well, don't you think that they have more experience since they deal with more murders? It would make sense." She had done her research, and just one of the officers in the homicide department had worked on 10 murders. One worked on 10 murders in 1 year. Yet these men were trying to convince them that Egypt's case was better in the township police department's hands. Lindsay called BS. During this interview, they also learned about how close Chuck was to this department. He owns a company that provides public transportation throughout different states across the U.S., a pretty big business. Chuck was into public safety, so he actually went on ride-alongs with the Van Buren Township Police Department. He knew the officers, and he thought they were great guys. So was Chuck worried about losing some kind of business contract with the city or Michigan as a whole? Maybe he didn't want to ruffle any feathers, but that couldn't be it, because that was his daughter. He could have just really been bros with these guys and trusted that they were absolutely doing the best they possibly could. But that was not good enough for Dwayne and Lindsay. There were times I was cringing as these guys were talking about how great their polygraph technology was. It's a pseudoscience. It's not even admissible in court. It's a waste of time. But they were arguing that their polygraph guy was never wrong. After this interview, which seemed to go nowhere except maybe getting Lindsay a job offer, that's right. The director turned to Dwayne and said, "Oh, she's good," and said she was wasting her time being a teacher and should join the police academy. Wow, that's right. Okay, wow. After leaving this interview, they thought they would never get a break in this case, but something wild was about to happen. Lindsay and Dwayne's goal at this point was just to get the case out of the hands of the Van Buren Township Police Department and into the hands of the Michigan State Police. And by the way, just to bring some light into this entire situation, all the while, Lindsay and Dwayne were growing closer and closer, and their relationship was getting stronger and stronger, as you can imagine. And finally, Dwayne proposed to Lindsay, and the ring, that was a ring that Egypt had always wanted when she got engaged. Without knowing it, Tina had given the ring to Dwayne to give to Lindsay, and it is a very, very special ring. I think it is exactly where it belongs, on Lindsay's finger. She now carries around a piece of Egypt wherever she goes, and it is such an honor and a reminder of a beautiful woman who was lost too soon. At this time, there was still no arrest for Egypt's murder. Lindsay and Dwayne were 100% convinced that the Van Buren Township Police Department was wasting their time with Kenny, and they were going to do their best to prove it. They were not going to stop. They couldn't stop. They wouldn't stop. And that's actually the name of their podcast. Can't Stop, Won't Stop. They started to raise more and more awareness for her case, and at that point, they were convinced they had to go to someone higher up because after the doozy of an interview they had with the chief, the director, and the detectives, they figured they were going to get nowhere. It was coming up on the 2nd anniversary of Egypt's death, so the first thing they wanted to do was reach out to a local newspaper and have an article written about Egypt's story. The Belleville Area Independent was the publication that talked about everything going on in Van Buren Township. It was March 25th, 2019, and wait until you hear about the drama and the unfortunate circumstances that were playing out when they tried to get Egypt's story written about. Lindsay sent an email to the township supervisor, Kevin McNamara, and the public safety director, Greg Lorraine. She explained that she had called to get the article published and had spoken to a woman named Rosemary over the phone. Lindsay got some weird pushback because Rosemary was like, "Well, you know what? Chuck is for the police and Tina's against the police." Lindsay wasn't sure what that had to do with an article about Egypt, and she said that's not even true. Rosemary responded, "Well, that's what the police told me." When Lindsay snapped back and said she wanted that in writing, Rosemary hung up on her, saying she wanted nothing to do with the case. The call lasted 2 minutes. Of course, Lindsay was upset, so she wrote this email about the treatment she was getting and experiencing from the township and that it wasn't acceptable. Lindsay never got a response, but she was told that Rosemary had been instructed by the police not to speak to them. On July 23, Dwayne reached out to who he thought was the lead detective on the case, and guess what? It turns out he was no longer working on the case. No one had even notified Egypt's family that there was someone else on Egypt's case. They didn't have the common courtesy to let them know. Dwayne was trying to look at this as a positive thing. Maybe new eyes, fresh eyes would be looking through everything. But that couldn't be further from the truth. William Bettendorf was the new lead on the case, and there's a 20-minute phone conversation between Lindsay and him. I'm going to tell you, I listened to the whole thing, and I'm so glad I did, but I'm not going to make you do that. I think it was worth the 20 minutes, but I'm going to paraphrase what was said and highlight the most important, damning, or downright disgusting things or confusing things for all of you. The first thing I noticed was he was out of breath. He was just talking about how this case is so hard for him. I understand that it is hard, but as statistics are concerned, They have 2 homicides per year in this township. What could be more important than Egypt's murder? He was making excuses for why he hadn't gotten to things yet, like, oh, I'm so busy, there's so much that has gone on, and so much time has passed. But I digress. He does say that there are only 3 people working on the entire case. 3, and it's still in the best hands. So, Lindsay says, you know what, you just said it was a lot of work. Don't you think that someone more experienced should help? He blatantly says, oh yeah, the Michigan State Police, they don't want this case. Lindsay was taken aback. She was like, wow, they're not interested in Egypt's case? In the next couple of minutes, they talked about the polygraph again, going back and forth about whether it was inconclusive or whether he failed miserably. It's just, again, who cares? It's pointless. It can't even be used. Then he goes on to mention the FBI, just like the other officers had mentioned before, talking about how the FBI agents say that there's only one person that has a clear motive to do this. And what was that motive? The recent breakup and the new boyfriend. But it also kind of seems like they don't even have information. They keep saying the same thing and going in circles about why Kenny is the one they want to focus on. Lindsay makes a good point. Okay guys, you've had this information for over 2 years. What's going on? What's stopping you from arresting him? Then she asked one more time, can't the state police just take the case? That's when he blatantly says, oh, they've looked at it and they didn't have any interest in it at all. It really made me sad. It was just the way that he said it. Like, they have no reason to want this case. It's not just a case, it's a person. I just can't imagine listening to that, being at my daughter's or my mother's or my sister's funeral. It's a person hearing that somebody doesn't care. It's just insensitive and heartless. I understand there are people who lose their lives every day, and I know that a lot of resources go into it, and maybe they don't think anyone is special. But when you lose someone, they are special. And seriously, literally, at the end of this conversation, you know what he says? We just have to take the wait-and-see approach. Sounds like he doesn't plan to do anything with the case. What does that mean for the family? They're just going to sit there and wait? There was another interesting thing in the interview. She asked them, because she heard this, why Steve had told her, the Van Buren Township Police Department don't with me. It seems like they kind of cover for Steve or, let things get swept under the rug for him. So she asked why it turned out, and I didn't want to go into this, but Steve had tried to get Dave, the private investigator, put in jail. He had tried to bring charges against him, and went all the way to court. It was embarrassing, and none of those charges ever stuck. But why was something drug-related going on? They didn't know. Lindsay just wants to know. It could be anyone related to this case. Why are we just not looking into certain people? She starts to give them theories. She says, well, there were a lot of people going in and out. How do we know that one of those people picking up drugs didn't see Egypt and get infatuated with her, then come back when they knew the neighbors were going out of town? How do we know that maybe they knew her schedule, maybe they went there to do her harm or to take advantage of her? We don't know who this Steve guy is, and why would he make a statement that the police don't with him, and why try to protect a man like that? It just seems like something doesn't add up. So they made a Facebook page called Justice for Egypt, The Truth Behind the Investigation. It was August 2019, 26 months after Egypt's murder, and their mission for this group was for the community to come together and find justice. Any tips, anything like that? This came in handy because something crazy was about to happen. I find this to be very interesting. All they wanted to do was get the case out of the township's hands and into the state police's hands. As soon as Lindsay starts to share things in the Facebook group, you know how it spreads like wildfire. Everyone wants to know. Now the community is taking notice. They're starting to become concerned because she's sharing everything that you just heard. They were starting to think about things in a different light. They were upset. They didn't think they were being protected by their police department. So on September 9, 2019, all of their hard work paid off, because they got an interview with a detective first lieutenant from the Michigan State Police. I'm not going to go into this whole interview, But the most important thing for you to take away from this is that he says he had talked to the township police department a number of times and literally asked them if they needed help, and they said no. They declined. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, but a number of times. They offered him 12 men to come in and work on Egypt's case. So it was a lie. Would you want liars working on your case? Because that 20-minute conversation Lindsay got under the Freedom of Information Act, and she gave it to this first lieutenant from the Michigan State Police. After this meeting, they wanted to get a petition signed. They wanted people to come forward and ask the Van Buren Township Police to hand over Egypt's case to the Michigan State Police. They got 14,000 people to sign this petition, believe it or not. Egypt's own family, one of her sisters, her stepmom, and some of her friends, did not like this. They pushed back, making public Facebook posts asking people not to sign the petition, in all caps with like 10 exclamation points. Do not sign this. You're gonna do more damage than good. You don't realize what you're doing. It's based on lies. This was such a back and forth all the time. There were even threats like, if you sign this and something happens, it's gonna be your fault, to that effect. You know what I'm saying? The family was divided, like I said, the great divide. I'm just gonna be straight up. If it wasn't for Lindsay and Dwayne, I don't think this case would have gotten as far as it did. Wait till you hear what happens next and where everything stands regarding who did this to Egypt. Some of Egypt's family members even accused Lindsay of doing this for attention. Can you imagine that? The attention they were trying to get was on Egypt. She was reaching out to everyone, podcasters, probably YouTubers, who knows? She was going to all media outlets, and they didn't even want to talk to her at first. Lindsay doesn't win a prize. Nobody wins anything. We can never bring Egypt back, but we can bring the person that did this to justice. That's what we can do, and that's what Lindsay wanted to do. So call it luck or something else, but there's finally a break in the case. It's persistence. Maybe, like Lindsay said, can't stop, won't stop. She started to CC that head lieutenant of the state police on every email that she would send to the Van Buren Police Department. She would CC the state police every time, again and again and again. She was doing this because she wanted to be annoying. She wanted to be the persistent person that they just wanted to get rid of. To say, hand the case to the Michigan State Police. We're tired of it. They were doing everything they could. They showed up at the town council meetings on Zoom because now at this point we're going into 2020 and it's COVID-19, that whole thing. But they were persistent. Anytime there was any kind of meeting in town over Zoom, they were there. You couldn't get rid of Lindsay and Dwayne, and they would ask questions every time regarding Egypt's case. Months and months went by. Every single chance they got, they just kept pushing and pestering the local authorities, again and again, criticizing the local police, and trying to get the investigation moved. They never got responses, never. Nobody seemed to care. They just wanted to ignore them and hope they would go away. But then one day something happened. Dwayne says to Lindsay, "Oh my God, did you see the email that we just got back from the town clerk?" And she's like, "No, what do you mean?" He replies, "Guess what? They accidentally responded thinking they were only responding to the local officials, but not to Dwayne, and somehow Dwayne was still left on the response." Can you believe that? Okay, so the town clerk had meant to remove the family members from his response before hitting send, but he forgot. And you know what he said? "Is there any way these emails to everyone can be blocked? I'm personally not interested in the stupidness." The stupidness? These were emails about Egypt, a woman that was murdered in their town. I think we can all agree it's not stupidness. And of course, you know what Lindsay did. She took that email and put it everywhere, on Facebook pages, on the township pages. She gave it to the state police. That's right, here was the county clerk. This is what they think of an unsolved murder of an innocent woman named Egypt Covington. This created a forked storm. Even though the clerk apologized, saying, "Oh, I didn't mean any disrespect to Egypt. I really just didn't want to be on a chain of emails. It doesn't matter." There was a public protest, a march that was held by Lindsay and Dwayne. And just one day afterward, guess who reaches out? It actually kind of brings tears to my eyes, the Michigan State Police. It was the lead detective on the case, and when he reached out to Lindsay and Duane, she was like, "Does this mean that you have our case?" He said yes. They were so excited, they couldn't help but cry. These were tears of joy. This is exactly what they wanted, and it was so emotional. It was November of 2020, and it had been more than 3 years that had gone by. Finally, it was in the hands of the Michigan State Police. They figured they waited this long, they were probably going to have to wait a long time before anything new happened in this case. But just a little over 3 months later, they got some very big but very unexpected information. They were informed that an arrest had been made. This was huge. Everyone getting the news about this arrest had their heads spinning. Who was it? Was it Kenny? Nobody knew. Lindsay wanted to find out whether it was Kenny, so she called him. When he answered the phone, she realized, Kenny's not in jail, so it's not Kenny. So who was arrested? There was no other information, they just had to wait. It turns out the Michigan State Police gave names of the suspects, 3 of them. This added so much more confusion because when they gave the names of these men who had been arrested, no one knew who they were. These names came out in the final weeks of 2021. Shane Evans, Timothy Moore, and Shandon Groom. They were arrested and charged in the murder of Egypt Covington. The names meant nothing to Egypt's friends and family. This was a small town where everyone knew each other. So who were these men? It was confusing. In March of this year, 2022, all 3 of them appeared on a Zoom call for a preliminary hearing. The biggest question everyone wanted to know was how and what happened. Why would these men want to hurt her? The prosecution laid out their case in this pretrial hearing, and an entirely new story started to emerge, one that I still cannot wrap my brain around. This is an ongoing case. Dare I say it's an unsolved murder because these men have not gone to trial, and all 3 of them are related. Shane and Timothy are brothers, and Shandon is their cousin. Well, guess what? One of them knew Egypt, Shane Evans. They had gone to high school together. But there was something else. Remember Steve and Megan? Well, Steve had actually hired Shane to cut the lawn. What lawn? The lawn in front of the duplex. Who lives in the duplex? Steve, Megan, their child, and Egypt Covington. Shane saw Egypt all the time because he was there to cut the grass. How did all of this connect? Well, police said that they ran video surveillance tapes and saw a Dodge Ram entering a nearby parking lot. They connected this truck to these men. That truck was seen at a gas station right in Egypt's duplex vicinity on the night she was killed. They wanted to know what happened, so they brought Shane Evans in. The story that he told seems unreal, unbelievable, especially to me. This is what I don't understand. And you'll have to piece this together yourself and leave it in the comments because I am still so confused. Shane said that his brother and his cousin, who live all the way in Toledo, were in town that night and wanted some weed. They just wanted to have a little smoke out. Shane says, "Well, I know someone who sells it, but unfortunately he's out of town this weekend for a music festival, so I guess you're just gonna have to wait." Well, here's the thing. When has it ever been hard to get weed? I don't know. You tell me. This was Chuck's argument, and I have to agree. He said it's not hard to get weed in Michigan. But Shane is adamant that his brother and his cousin said, "You know what? We'll just go to Steve's house and get it ourselves. We'll let ourselves in and take what we want and leave." So according to Shane, he had them follow him in their truck. Shane was in front, driving past Egypt's duplex, while they were driving behind. He uses his hand, points out the window, and points to the duplex, saying, "It's the unit on the right." That's where he directed them to go. According to his story, instead of going into the unit on the right, they end up going into the unit on the left, Egypt Covington's unit. These 2 men came in, men she had never met in her entire life. According to prosecutors, while Egypt was watching a movie, they bound her with Christmas lights and shot her once through a couch cushion into the head, killing her. Why? If you were going to steal weed from a neighbor, why would you end up killing an innocent woman? Shane later tells police that his brother sent him a text saying, "Oops, wrong door." That's all the text said, heartless and inhumane, just, "Oops, wrong door." Do you believe that all it took was them going into the wrong unit for Egypt to lose her life? That nothing else was going on, that there are no other connections, even though Shane knew her? Of course, they have a defense and are already trying to say that the videos were bad, that you can't really read the license plate, and that you can't prove they were there. But there's enough evidence for them to go to trial, and the best piece of evidence was their cell phones. Apparently their cell phones were at Egypt's place for a matter of minutes, and then Egypt's phone and their phones went in the same direction until Egypt's phone was discarded. So they were definitely there. A lot has been done by people like Lindsay and of course Egypt's family to keep her memory alive. There was actually a beer created called A Girl Named Egypt, and I wanted to showcase that on screen. Chuck also set up a fund in Egypt's name to help kids learn how to play musical instruments. Not only that, a monument was set up in Belleville, and the inscription comes right from Egypt's journal. All of this information I've shared is everything I've heard and tried to piece together, and here are some of my own thoughts. I am not a detective, this is not a court of law, this is a YouTube video. I do this so that we can remember someone who was taken from this earth, Egypt Covington. I feel so bad for her entire family. I know there's been a lot of drama in this case, and there are many different perspectives. I mean no harm to anyone. I'm just here to gather information, and I'm getting all this from what's readily available online. I will say that Lindsay has decided to pause her podcast for now, out of respect for the family and the sensitive information that could be detrimental to this case in some way. She plans to restart it when the trial has concluded, and I totally understand that. I'm going to give you all of those links in my description box. Now, I wanted to give a reason that this could possibly have been a random crime. It's going to be quick, but you have to understand that criminals don't think like we do. My father is a criminal. I've grown up listening to his stories. When someone is already in that mindset, we don't know if they were on drugs. There's nothing to go on right now. But if they were on other substances, you're not in your right mind. Regardless, if you have a criminal mind, that's why they call it a criminal mind. If you're hyped up and you go in, and you've already got charges on you because just so you know, they do have criminal records. One of them, I think the main person being charged who had the gun and committed the crime, already had a criminal record and could be put away for a long time. You would think the reasonable thing to do is not to commit an even greater crime. But in that moment, in that split second when you think no one's there, when you think no one will care, when you're a criminal and you're thinking more about yourself, in that split second, you make these kinds of decisions. It could have been all about marijuana. It seems horrific to think and unbelievable to assume that this could have just been a wrong door. When we talked about the Christmas lights, the only thing that comes to my mind is that she was moving. If there were boxes set up, and things were in those boxes with one labeled Christmas, and Christmas lights were readily accessible, it would make sense. When you're trying to hold someone down who might be screaming or fighting, you tell your buddy, hey, grab something right now. If cords are all around you, it's a terrible thought, but they might have been readily available in that moment to stop her.